across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of Common Sense. Thank you to Alex Phillips. Back very soon, right here on Talk. Of course, lots to get through this afternoon, as you've been hearing this curious story of the hotel firm housing asylum seekers that has made £700 million a year from taxpayers, with some reportedly enjoying perks like cooking lessons and fitness classes. I mean, it is just an extraordinary story. You really cannot. I know this kind of, in a way, confirms sort of what we already knew, but when you see it in black and white and you get the actual numbers, you are forced to say, so what? Say what? 700? What? Details on the asylum hotels. What are the alternatives, by the way? We'll look at that in more detail in just a couple of moments. Also, workless youths who are on the internet 24 hours a day won't get out of bed for a salary of less than £40,000, the House of Lords have been told. What's going on there? How do we arrive in this place when your 17-year-old is demanding 40k before they even wiggle their big toe in the morning? More on that too. And cyclists who kill pedestrians could face life in prison under new laws, with dangerous cycling set to be treated the same as dangerous driving. Maybe there'll be drivers out with sort of those helmet cams, you know, like the cyclists do, taking pictures and images of the two-wheeled barons doing their bad stuff. More on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. So asylum hotels, what are the alternatives? We can talk forever about why we should not be in this position in the first place, and everything that Alex was saying about, you know, literally stopping the boats and not allowing boats to come to this country stands. I don't know anyone, left-wing, right-wing, who thinks this is okay. And it's definitely not okay. Even if you come at it from a very sort of left-wing humanitarian point of view, it is not okay. If you feel very, very passionately, as I think most Brits do, about the audacity of thousands of people on a weekly basis on occasions making it to these shores with almost no paper, no way of identifying, of course it's unacceptable. But let's deal with what we have so far. And this story, and it's what you might be, if you've been listening to Talk since breakfast this morning, you'll be familiar with the nuts and bolts of this story. I'll just run over some of the details. So this is the Stay Belvedere Hotels Limited. They've got over 50 sites, hotels in the UK. They got the big contract from the government. This, by the way, is not Keir Starmer or Yvette Cooper. This is the Tories. This happened under the Conservatives. And they were given a £700 million a year contract. And of course, £700 million a year is taxpayers' money. That is your money. Just think about that for 1 second. When they're taking away the winter fuel allowance, when they are spiking the tax rates, when they are making life almost unaffordable because of energy bills, while simultaneously throwing £700 million to a hotel chain that is housing people who entered the country illegally. I mean, it's beyond belief. There are no words that could adequately encapsulate, graphically describe the sheer lunacy of this situation. And this, by the way, doesn't really touch the sides. We know that 10,000 people have crossed the channel so far this year. So this hotel chain provides room for asylum seekers. We know that the daily cost is about £6 million. £6 million every single day. Already, this is an issue that is unsustainable. Now, of course, the government said we're going to close the hotels. OK, so you're going to close the hotels. Right. OK, what are you going to do with all the people currently in the hotels? And I find it interesting, the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, isn't it annoying when people come into their own and you get a little bit of honesty when they're in opposition? But didn't say anything like this when in power. He says the taxpayer is picking up the bill for Labour's loss of control of our borders. With respect to Chris Philp, and I sort of know him a little bit, he's a smart operator, switched on in lots of areas. I'm afraid you can't put this into the lap of the Labour government. I mean, this literally is a case where they inherited this problem from the Conservatives. The Conservatives signed the contract. Let's take one area, for example. The IBIS budget in Bishop Stortford is one of around 210 hotels housing just shy of 40,000 asylum seekers. Mostly male population. There's a big choice of things to do there. Cookery classes, English lessons. You can do support services, some legal stuff. You can have all of that. I think there's tiddlywinks of an evening, and if you're partial, a hand of Old Maid, I'm sure, before you go to bed with your Horlicks. One person, now this was a Sun story, the Sun splashed this story today. A whistleblower said it's a very well-run hotel with loads on offer. It basically at the same level as the 4-star all-inclusive I went to on holiday last year. It does look rather nice. They get 3 fresh meals a day. Fresh fruit is available around the clock. I don't begrudge the kids getting the help, and the residents are generally polite, but it does make you wonder if they would ever want to leave. Well, it really does. I mean, I can't imagine arriving in Eritrea to claim some asylum and there being some kind of reciprocal arrangement that looked anything like that. It would probably be a prison cell. Now, we can argue forever, again, about stopping the boats and how it's happened and how we can arrest this situation before it even gets to hotels. But as we sit here today, there's 38,000 people stuffed into hotels, and it is costing us an absolute fortune. And you've got one company trousering £700 million a year in taxpayers' cash. Half of me doesn't blame the company. You think, well, OK, good, nice work if you can get it. Those hotels would not be that full all year round, that consistently. So it's happy days and trebles all round at the Belvedere Hotel Emporium. But it is taxpayers' money. So if you don't have the hotels, where do you put 38,000 people? What is the answer to that? What is the alternative to the hotels? 0344 499 1000. When I hear Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper say, we've got a good idea, I tend to think, firstly, you probably haven't, and secondly, I run for cover. I can't imagine what the alternative is going to be. The deal with this particular hotel group runs out in the autumn, I think around about September, so they'll no longer have this contract, but yeah, I'm guessing some of it will be renewed. Where do you put 38,000 people? 0344 499 1000. I'd love your specific answer to that question. What would the alternative be? But just second, I mean, I know we've been over this many times. Just your overarching view on how the heck this country got into this situation. How is this something? No, it doesn't make front page news. In fact, when, this weekend the weather's going to be rather good, certainly on the south coast, the numbers will be high. You can bet your life that between now and when we're back on air on Monday, you'll be looking at figures nearly 1,000 more people. 1,000 more people just arrived. I mean, let that digest for a second. It's absolutely huge. So what do you do with all of those people? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this story and the other big stories of the day. Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator, is with us. Afternoon to you, Mike.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Good as gold. Nice to have you on with us again. So we know the headline, 700 million quid. It's an awful lot of money. It's unsustainable long term. Labour say they're going to sort it out. It is worth reminding us, though, Mike, of Keir Starmer's ongoing message. He's been very, very passionate about this. If no one got the memo, this was Keir Starmer's way of solving the problem.
You will have helped to smash the gangs. Take those gangs down. Smashing the gangs. No shortcut. Smash the criminal gangs. No gimmicks. Have to smash those gangs. Just the hard graft of sleeves rolled up. Smash the gangs. Practical government. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. We will smash the gangs that undermine our security. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
Smash the gangs.
You have to have a bit of David Lammy on the end there, Mike. So if you didn't get what was being said there, Mike, smash the gangs, apparently. That is the answer to the problem. This is unsustainable, though.
I mean, you're entirely right, Ian. This is the result of decades of underinvestment in our immigration system, particularly the infrastructure for processing asylum seekers as well. And I'm sure many people will have had a proposal for an asylum centre in their local area and thought, well, not on my doorstep, pal. I mean, this is
Yeah.
not a particular bit of infrastructure that anyone really wants in a neighbourhood. But unfortunately, there are still going to be, we can try and stem the flow of this. And, I think unless we see some concrete proposals from Starmer, this smash the gangs phrase is in danger of becoming as meaningless as Rishi Sunak stop the boats. But fundamentally, that 700 million needs to be spent on new infrastructure that isn't going to private companies to house these people.
Yeah, and I don't know what form that takes, because even Nigel Farage recognises you can't just get rid of 38,000 people. So when people like him are conceding that this isn't something that you could just deport everybody who is deemed to be illegal, there is an irredeemable reality here, and that is that these people and more will join that 38,000 list, are going to be here for a very long time still, and they will have to live somewhere.
Yes, and look, we have to remember that it isn't a simple matter of just getting rid of the 38,000 people. It's about having a system that can quickly and effectively identify those people that actually do need political asylum, do need protection that this country can offer and are genuine asylum seekers, and those that are not. And of course, this is one of the key debates, is that the word asylum seeker has become increasingly politicised now. The proportion, the context of this, of course, is the record high net migration figures that we're seeing, of which the small boat crossings are a tiny fraction of that as well. And I've been saying this on Talk for a while now.
Yep.
The government, both the Tories and Labour, need to have an honest conversation with the country about what the dependency our economy has on immigration in many low-paid sectors like hospitality and social care as well. And if we want to move away from that, we can do it, but it needs a wholesale rethink of how our immigration system, of which our asylum system is part of that, operates.
And just another point on this, all of those hotels presumably used to employ quite a lot of people. I would imagine they employ different security guards and people like that now. They won't have all the usual chefs and maids and cleaners and all that goes with it that would ordinarily be in a hotel. I know I've read sort of anecdotal stories of people who had like a shop in a hotel, often a little foyer that has a small parade of shops, all closed down because, of course, the government took them over to say, no, this is the purpose, so we don't need the nail bar or the newsagents anymore. So it's got an effect in that respect as well.
It has. This underlines the fact that these facilities are not the best place for asylum seekers to be. And we have to remember back to the riots last summer, when there were some very disturbing scenes outside hotels, which not just endangered the lives of the asylum seekers, but also the staff that worked in those hotels as well. There's a reason that we have secure processing facilities that meet the standards of international human rights law for the safety of both those people coming into the country and the staff that work there as well. These are not the correct facilities for them. Nobody thinks it is, but it's just another example of how a sticking plaster solution has been applied by successive governments. I don't want to let the Labour government off the hook on this as well. If they said they wanted to try and deal with the gangs, that's fine, but it also means looking at the plumbing and how people actually are processed once they reach this country as well.
Indeed. Let's move to this story. This is another troubling story as well, Mike. Workless youths won't get out of bed for less than 40,000 quid, according to the House of Lords. Youth inactivity has surged. Nearly 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds not working or studying. This is the highest level since 2013. Graham Cowley, working with the NEETs, those not in education, etc., or training, in Blackpool, claims some young people won't work for less than 40k, highlighting attitudes post-lockdown. Now, the Shadow Home Secretary, twice he's appeared in our stories now, Mel Stride, blamed video games and pornography for increased worklessness among young men who make up this group. Whatever the reason, the number is troubling, and I know this is probably largely anecdotal, but if you're saying I won't get out of bed for less than 40k, you need to give your head a wobble, don't you?
Well, we have to look at the fact that salaries in this country haven't returned to the pre-financial crisis peak. We have to look at, say, what £40,000 would have been worth back in 2008 as well. And there's a lot of talk about a lost generation here. Those economic inactivity figures are quite stark on a high level, almost 3 million people, but a lot of those people are dealing with long-term health issues, particularly for young men, mental health problems. But there is always going to be, every social theory has an identification of a degree of worklessness in there as well. And there's always that degree of people that don't want to work the work share, whatever you want to call them to. Now, the figure sounds quite stark, but what would a salary of £40,000 get you in today's country? It certainly wouldn't help the average individual person be able to build a deposit to get on a house. And that is certainly not if they lived in the southeast.
Yeah.
And not only those kind of jobs are available outside of the country, certainly in places like Blackpool, which has the highest levels of deprivation and the lowest life expectancy of any part of England.
Which is extraordinary. When I was a kid, Blackpool was a fun place. It was, full of life. And now there's almost a sort of ghost town sense to Blackpool. It's got huge employment issues, huge issues around depravity, deprivation, I should say, and huge issues around, well, depends where you go, there's a lot of depravity. And of course, it's got huge issues, around tourism, which was once a sort of go-to place for Brits to go on holiday. And yet Blackpool has taken a complete turn over the years. I know they're trying to turn it around and make it into something, far more attractive again, but it appears it's a huge work in progress. Listen, stay with us, Mike. Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator, looking at the big stories of the day. We'll come on to more Ed Miliband's madness, slammed after claiming ramping up fossil fuel production would not cut Britain's energy bills. True or false? We'll look at that. Cyclists who kill pedestrians as well. And drinking and smoking in early adulthood affects health by the age of 36. It's not like you got till you're 70 to go, I'll just give up then. Oh no, you could be knackered at 36. Details on the way, everything you need to know, all the breaking news. That question, Asylum hotels, what are the alternatives to that? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
There's been a paucity of legislation which the government is seeking to redress by introducing, it's going some way towards parity with motorists. But in my view, there's a crucial piece of the jigsaw missing. And one of the problems is if you video in your car a cyclist cycling dangerously, what do you have? You have a cyclist cycling dangerously. How do you locate that cyclist? Well, you're not going to pull him over. When you have a car driving dangerously, you have a number plate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Looking at the big stories of the day, we have Mike Indian with us, the political journalist and commentator. On to this one then. Mike, Ed Miliband's rarely out of the news at the moment. His net zero policy was slammed for banning new North Sea oil and gas licences, with critics arguing it restricts energy supplies and raises costs. Let's have a listen to another bout of stupidity from the Energy Secretary, speaking only yesterday on Sky News.
Another point for why this country has unbelievably high energy prices is that we tax our energy companies.
No, you're wrong. I'm really sorry, but you're wrong about that because the price is set internationally. I'm really sorry, but that's not correct.
OK, well, let's put commodities aside. If you increase taxes on supermarkets to 78%...
It depends whether it's...
If you increase taxes on supermarkets to 78%, what would happen to the price of food?
It depends.
What would happen to the price of food?
It depends whether it's a domestic market where the price is set domestically.
This is a globally unquestionable factor about economics. If you lowered the tax of 78% on energy companies to the regular...
On oil and gas companies, it wouldn't make a difference to the price. In fact...
Yes, it would.
I'm afraid it wouldn't because the point is that the price is set internationally.
But there are lots of things that factor into the price that we pay. The lots of supply chain costs you've mentioned yourself. This is a huge cost in the supply chain.
Mike, maybe you can enlighten me here, but what was being said there by the interviewer was essentially, if you drop the price of something, it will be cheaper. Mr. Miliband was saying, no, it won't. Did I miss something?
Well, what he's talking about there is the choice that the government has chosen to maintain the high level of taxation that was imposed, the energy price windfall tax that was imposed by the Sunak government on North Sea oil and gas in particular as well. What Mr. Miliband was saying was that actually, if we think back to the recent price spike, the energy price crisis of about 3 years ago now, Ian, that was driven by international pressures, particularly the war in Ukraine and heavy reliance on the Russian oil and gas imports that travel through Eastern Europe. So they're both saying the same thing. Now, what the Energy Secretary is right about, and this is a very technical point, is that in the short term, if the international price is still high, even if the government cuts taxes, that profit will simply go back into the pocket of the energy companies rather than back into consumer. What the government is trying to do is persuade us that the greater the use of homegrown renewables, the cheaper the price of energy that we have to buy will be.
But in terms of this being a global thing, which was the point Mr. Miliband was making there, we are paying more for our energy than pretty much any other Western country on the planet. So there is clearly a reason for that regardless of what was he said, she said, etc., that there must be a way to address that.
There is, and I think it's a complex series of questions. I mean, look, one thing that we have all been agreed upon since the invasion of Ukraine is that Europe in general was too reliant on oil and gas imports from outside of it as well. And this is why the European Commission, this is why the UK government had the Energy Security Summit recently. And again, fair credit back to the Sunak government, they recognised that energy security, shorter supply chains and more reliable supplies closer to home were the key to keeping price volatility low. But then you get into a question of, okay, is this going to translate to cheaper bills for people across the country? And of course, this goes back to the question about UK steel as well. The government said it will commit £2 billion to putting in greener furnaces. We too often assume that green is good. Actually, what can often happen is that we are replacing these sources with less reliable forms of renewable energy. So oil and gas is natural gas particularly has been a very consistent source of energy for the UK since the 1980s. Unless you replace that with like a bridging technology, for example, nuclear energy, you tend to often fall back on using wind farms, which are only operating about 80% of the time. So again, it comes down to the source of energy as well. The key thing is, for me, how long do we have to wait before these green technologies are in place, before they can guarantee security of supply and therefore cheaper bills? The two things are compatible, but one does not necessarily follow the other.
And this story as well, cyclists who kill pedestrians to face life sentences. It is a rarity, but it does happen. Life imprisonment under new laws updating the Victorian-era legislation, because I don't think there is dangerous cycling offences at the moment. There isn't really a law that exists. I think they've in the past, when something's happened, they've had to sort of try and rely on some old ancient law, which was near as they could get. But there have been people who've died because they were run over by a bike and nothing much happens.
I mean, look, cyclists are road users, and I think should be subject to the same laws and that govern all of us that, use the highways and byways. I think we have to think about also in central London, particularly, how many people do just walk across cycle lanes and not look where they are going as well. And a lot of this, I think, could be addressed by better delineation, better cycling infrastructure as well. And it's wrong to tarnish an entire group of people with the actions, in some cases, the unfortunate accidents of a very small minority. But a severe penalty does often act as a deterrent. But sometimes these accidents occur because a pedestrian simply steps out in front of a cyclist without looking as well. So we have to make sure that's accounted for in the proceedings as well.
Indeed. And talking of an untimely demise, drinking and smoking in early adulthood affects health by the age of 36. So this was Finnish researchers who tracked 326 people over 30 years, finding poor habits led to higher depression, metabolic risk scores as well. Not something, I think a lot of people think, well, I can drink until I'm about 50. That seems to be a bit of a line that some people draw in the sand, and then I'll give it all up. I'll start running every day, and I'll be a fighting fit character as I move to the autumn of my years. But apparently 36 is the danger zone, Mike.
Well, you couldn't have picked a better guest for this, because I'm actually 36, Ian. So, one of my talks guinea pig in this regard. You can see if my chain smoking, hard drinking, sedentary lifestyle catches up with me, and I'm still here in 6 months' time. Sort of like Robert Winston type documentary on that.
That's right. Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? Or that fella in the States who's determined to live forever, whose name escapes me at the moment. But he's doing...
We'll all know him if he lives forever, though. You all know him if he lives
forever. Yeah, we certainly will. I mean, but there is that balance, isn't it? We all kind of, we all scratch our heads on this a little bit, because it's sometimes nice to go out and have a drink, and, that's great. And sometimes you drink a little bit too much, and that can also be fun sometimes. You don't want to do it all the time. Some people have the occasional cigarette with a glass of beer or a wine, etc., as I do. So there's that. I mean, you could just do nothing from the minute you're born and just do healthy stuff.
If we look at the generational trends, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Z particularly, that age where they can smoke and drink, that they are consuming less of these things as well. And I think we do live in a more publicly health aware society. And of course, if the government smoking ban goes through, that will create an entirely smoke-free generation, or so they claim, or otherwise a massive black market for tobacco products. So I think these things are cutting through as well. But of course, people are allowed to indulge. They're allowed to have the pleasures in life that food, drink, and cigarettes provide them as well. And it's the tricky thing about personal choice versus public health.
Yeah, and I will argue till I go to my grave that 20 Marlborough Gold is part of your 5 a day. I mean, it's as simple as that. Mike, listen, great to have you on. Have a cracking weekend. Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator. Thank you to him. Over to you. Any of those stories, anything else you've picked up on as well? Plus the question, asylum hotels, what are the alternatives? Interesting one from Simon, who says, I said from day one, which was at the start of 2020, that the Tories should have pushed a few boats back and threatened a diplomatic spat with France at best, and the whole thing would have ended within a month. We have reactive government policies, financially backed by the indigenous tax farm that the UK has now become. Unfortunately, we now have an illegal migrant policy based on how calm the weather is on a particular day. That's a great way to put it as well. Expect at least 1,000 per day during the summer months. Call a national emergency. Don't hold your breath. Have a great weekend, says Simon in Devon. Absolutely bang on. I remember Sajid Javid when he was Home Secretary. I can remember there was a particular incident. I think it was one of those days where there were record numbers of people, or there'd been some incident, whatever it was. He didn't call it a national emergency, which he should have done, but he sort of tried to identify that it was a very serious problem, like it took a Home Secretary to say that. And he talked about sending in the drones and the cutters, and they were going to have all manner of stuff, helicopters and Chinooks and Lord knows what, submarines. This is how I certainly pictured it. None of that happened, and despite drone technology doing the most extraordinary things, and despite two countries, Britain and France, so you've got two governments, two Home Secretaries, two sets of intelligence services, two sets of border force, two sets of drones, two sets of military, and yet we cannot stop a load of people on a boat coming across the channel. To me, that just seems extraordinary. We just fired Katy Perry into space and brought her back again, but we can't stop a flipping boat off Dover. Curious times. 0344 499 1000. But it is what it is. We've got asylum hotels. What are the alternatives? 38,000, 40,000 people stuffed in hotels, 700 million quid a year, 5.5 million pound a day of your money. What is, assuming those people are not going anywhere, where do you put them? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Reference young folk, little hoodlums, apparently won't get out of bed for less than 40,000. Jacqueline in Liverpool says, my son's just finished a 5-year medical degree and starts as a F1. And he won't be getting £40,000 a year. All of that study, all of that graft, and boy, that is a tough degree. I've known a few people who've gone through that. It ain't easy, and yes, and you don't get your 40,000. So the idea that you spend most of your day sitting in bed picking your toenails and think you deserve 40k for doing jack is extraordinary. Alison says, when I was young, my friend and I were crossing a one-way street, which was also a main road. We were therefore looking the way the traffic was coming, as you do. When it was clear, we stepped onto the road and we were both knocked over by a postman on his bike, cycling the wrong way. My friend ended up in hospital overnight as she hit her head on the road. Nothing was ever done about it. That's extraordinary, isn't it? There are some roads, aren't there, where cyclists are allowed to go either way, even though it's a one-way. I mean, not on a that sounds like a main road. It was a main road. Clearly not quite the same thing. So yeah, I mean, you can do it whatever way you like, but a postman should be watching where he was going. He's a professional cyclist, after all. 0344 499 1000. So the hotel firm housing asylum seekers has made 700 million quid a year from taxpayer funds, with some reportedly enjoying perks like cooking lessons, fitness classes. I think there's some dominoes goes on, all manner of English lessons. Stay Belvedere Hotels runs 51 sites and is among those contracted amid rising channel crossings, now over 9,600 this year. That'll get over 10,000 this weekend, I guarantee it. The weather's going to be good, which always assists in that respect. Labour says it will shut the hotels to save billions, with asylum housing now costing $5.5 million a day. Where are they going to put all of those people? In a moment, Alp Mehmet will join us, chairman of Migration Watch UK. First, Ryan Saby, deputy editor over there at The Sun. Ryan, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian.
Always good to have you with us. I mean, look, we were aware of these numbers. You know, when you see it, and The Sun did a great splash on this today, it's only when you really see it sort of written down and see the images that really brings the story to life. This is just extraordinary.
Yeah, it's a lot of money being doled out by the government. They will say they've attempted to crack down on it by bringing down that bill from about £8 million a day or a week to sort of £5.5 million. And how you take it down even further, it's going to be really, really difficult for them. They won't set a date on when they expect these hotels to be absolutely clear, because at the moment it seems nigh on impossible to do so when you've got so many people coming in. But I think when you look at those pictures and you read about the sort of classes that were going on there, whether it's guitar classes or there's games rooms, gym classes, all that, people will feel uneasy about it.
Yeah, indeed. And certainly when I've spoken to politicians off the record, you've got your ear to the ground on this, Ryan, and they're brutally honest about it. They will usually concede that they don't know what to do, that this is sort of out of their control. Nobody really has a one-size-fits-all answer to this one. And whilst Labour are saying we're going to stop using these hotels, that's all fine and dandy, but where are you going to put 40,000 people when you do stop using them?
That's right, and I've spoken to Home Secretaries who've been in that job. They've tried to stop the numbers, but there's no one thing that will actually stop it. It's all very well for Rishi Sunak to be saying stop the boats. It's all very well for Sir Keir Starmer to say smash the gangs, but it needs several things going on at once, whether that's deportation flights that the Conservatives came up with Rwanda. This government is now talking about offshore hubs where you may be taken to a third country, such as the Balkans. North Macedonia has been spoken about in the last week or so. There is not just one thing. This government is trying to actually stop the supply of those actual boats, those boats that those migrants get in. And the trouble with those boats now, they're being more and more crammed with migrants as they cross the channel. And it's ever some more increasingly dangerous. So before you may have been getting 40 or so to the boat, these smuggling gangs are trying to get 50 or 60 into a boat just to up their margin. So it's an absolute, that we always talk about the perilous journey across the channel. It really is.
Yeah, and these aren't rowboats. I mean, they can go at a pretty fair speed as well. I mean, it's a perilous journey. I mean, nobody should be making it. It's a very busy waterway. It wouldn't take much to, we know there's been accidents and deaths and the like. And, the fact that a big old boat or a tanker of some kind hasn't hit one of them, I find extraordinary up until now. But interesting, they talk about, we can, we'll find the manufacturers of the boats, or we'll, smash the gangs, etc. We still have, and I said it a second ago, Ryan, we've got two countries predominantly. There are others looking for people smuggling gangs, but you've got two lots of military, two lots of drones, two lots of border force, two lots of home secretaries, two leaders. You've got two of everything between front. And, whilst we can send Katy Perry up in a rocket and get her to come back again, we can't stop a load of boats crossing the channel. I mean, it seems extraordinary that in 2025 we can't do this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and speaking to politicians from all sides, I think one of the things, if you had the British police or border force actually patrolling the beaches, our police or border force actually doing that, I wonder whether that will actually make a difference. Now, I know that we do have some access, but we only seem to have access into the control rooms, and it's the French border police who actually patrol that northern French coastline.
Yeah.
You just wonder whether actually when we do team up, and we're paying the French, I think it's about £500 million over 3 years, you just wonder whether the actual control or that partnership should actually be a little bit closer. But the trouble is, France, it's not really in their interest, really, for tens of thousands of people to stay in Calais. That, you know, you'd say that they'd much rather prefer them to come here. We have to spend taxpayers' money sort of sending them all over the country to different councils, housing them, paying them a sort of a weekly fee just to look after them and putting them up in hotels.
Yeah, one of my takeaways from this is if you want to make a bit of money quick, buy a hotel, because the government will probably rent it off you.
Yeah, true. And the government have made. They've actually trying to reduce the number of hotels that are being used. I think there were about 220 odd. I think they've got the number down a little bit. But yeah, as you say, we're going to get to this weekend, and we've got about 9,600 or so migrants have crossed the Channel this year. Is bound to get over that 10,000 mark in the coming days, and they keep coming. And until there's a proper deterrent, whether it's that offshore hub or that deportation plan, again, that could be one of the things that actually puts people off from making the journey.
Indeed. Listen, Ryan, have a great weekend. Thanks for being on with us. Ryan Saby is the deputy political editor over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. It was the splash in The Sun today that really, I think, just brought this story to life. Just seeing sort of the images and the numbers in print and it laid out in that kind of way, just to give you an idea and a sense of what we are dealing with here. And again, it doesn't really matter what way you slice it. It's 700 million quid of taxpayers' money. This is just one of many hotel groups or chains. They've got 51 sites. 9,600 have crossed this year. It's going to go over 10,000 by the weekend and into next week as well, where it's going to be a lovely, nice sunny weekend down there on the south coast and beyond, into the next week as well. So this is the perfect, to coin that phrase, the perfect storm for this situation to get worse. And it's funny, Ryan, just in part in that same story of Labour saying, well, we might look at some islands or some other places that we can send these people. They literally hit the roof over Rwanda. Rwanda wasn't perfect, by the way. I'm not absolutely sure it would have stopped everything either, because I don't think the government were going to implement it in the way that most people thought they might. But it's a bit rich, isn't it? Labour going, yeah, definitely, yeah, Rwanda was terrible, it's terrible. We're going to take you to court over it. And it's an awful place to go. And now they're considering a very similar thing. Let's speak with Alp Mehmet, chairman of Migration Watch UK. Alp, good afternoon to you. I don't know how many numbers we have to have, how many more people we have to have before someone somewhere is going to scream, this is a national emergency, because it clearly is.
It is a national emergency, and it's been one for some time. How many more numbers? All I can guarantee you is that we're going to hit records year after year after year, unless we can show and send the message that coming here illegally won't work. And you and Ryan have covered a lot of the ground there, or what needs to be done. But the fact is that at the moment, everything that this government is doing is not far from deterring anyone, is actually encouraging them to come here. There's more people in hotels probably now, even though the number of hotels being used may have gone down. And notice that the government hasn't actually said there are fewer people in hotels. Well, they're using bigger hotels maybe, I don't know. But I should also be wary about them saying we are using fewer hotels, so it's costing less. Because what's happening then is that they're shunting them off onto local authorities, where legally the local authorities are obliged to house those asylum seekers that are pushed in their direction, because the law says so. If you're destitute and you tick that little box saying I'm destitute, then I'm afraid that the local authority that has the responsibility, handed from the Home Office, will find accommodation for you. And it's a nonsense, really, that they are providing these sort of amenities and these sort of comforts for people who ultimately are looking to break into the country. Many of them, frankly, will never go back because we won't send them back. Some of those who come from countries who are prepared to take their nationals back and are regarded as safe may go back, but there are going to be more and more people coming over. This year, I was saying earlier in the year that we're likely to hit 50,000. Already, I think we're moving beyond that. And that's only those that we know about.
Sure.
There's probably going to be between 60 and 70,000 coming here, taking account of those who get in one way or another without our being aware of it. Sorry, I've said a lot.
Yeah, no, and you've said it beautifully. It's again the frustration that I think everybody feels on this. I'm going to keep making the point, Alp, that it doesn't matter whether you're left wing or right wing. Everyone can agree, surely, this is unacceptable. The question we are left with is, as the Labour government said they're going to stop using some of these hotels, this particular hotel group, their contract runs out, I think, in the autumn, round about September. Doubtless it will be renewed to some, maybe to a lesser degree, because you've got to find somewhere to put 40,000 people.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed, you do have to. And that's what I say about shunting them off onto local authorities. But look, perhaps we should be looking at the problem sort of further afield. You mentioned earlier when talking to Ryan that there are two sets of border forces, two sets of Home Secretaries and the rest of it. Actually, it's a lot more than that, because this problem starts at the external borders of the EU. There are hundreds of thousands making their way into the EU illegally every year. A lot of them will then make their way up to the northwest coast of France and make their way over in boats. They'll make their way over in boats because it works. They concoct a story which our courts, really, rather than questioning, make it the responsibility of the Home Office to prove or disprove whatever the story is. I mean, that's a nonsense. And I'm afraid until we detain those who arrive, deal with them quickly, and then remove them, then they will continue to come. And the government messed up. It fluffed its lines when it came to the opportunity of doing something about it with the bill that is now going through Parliament. I mean, that bill, if anything, is going to encourage people to come, as I keep saying, because there's nothing in it that requires the government to remove or return those who arrive illegally. Nothing. Yeah. It's a total waste of time. The government is flailing, and it finds now that all the flannel during the election, smashing the gangs and closing the hotels, it won't wash anymore, I'm afraid. Yeah. They've got to get real about it.
Spot on. Alp, very forthright stuff and very honest stuff. Thank you for your, as ever, your contribution to this. Alp Mimit, he is the chairman of Migration Watch UK. The last government, Rishi Sunak and that lot, I didn't think really it was in their hearts to sort this. This lot, even more so. It just doesn't sit in the DNA of socialists and Labour politicians to think in this way. It's not really the issue to them that it is to everybody else, because they think like they've got weird brains. I think we can all agree on that, just by dint of being politicians, let alone a left-wing politician. It just isn't within their political parameters, their template, their thinking. It doesn't rock them out of bed in the morning to be considering this to be among the most urgent of problems. You got 50,000 people, coming up to 50,000 people you're going to trying to accommodate in this country, while simultaneously People are being made homeless, they're living on the streets, people who served in the army can't get a place to live, and we're in this curious situation that if you sail across the channel, you'll be put up in a hotel. This is not sort of sensationalising it in any way, this is just a fact. You'll be given 3 meals a day, you'll be warm, you'll get a little bit of money. I know it's about £8 a week or something, it's not a lot of money, but you might get a phone as well. Some do, not all do, but you'll get your meals, and you've also got a chance of doing some lessons like cooking lessons, bit of fitness, some fencing, English language, tiddlywinks, and who knows, maybe a bit of cribbage of the evening as well. 0344 499 1000. If you took all of those people out of hotels, where would you put them though? Assuming you can't deport all of those, but where would they go? Back to local authorities? How would that work out? Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000.
There's been a paucity of legislation which the government is seeking to redress by introducing, it's going some way towards parity with motorists. But in my view, there's a crucial piece of the jigsaw missing. And one of the problems is if you video in your car a cyclist cycling dangerously, what do you have? You have a cyclist cycling dangerously. How do you locate that cyclist? Well, you're not going to pull him over. When you have a car driving dangerously, you have a number plate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
From Paul in Cardiff, who says, is it possible to introduce a migrant tax to cover the cost of keeping illegal migrants in hotels with 3 meals a day, etc.? This should be exempt from all taxpayers who are against the illegal immigration, but payable by those who support it, like Gary Lineker and other left-wingers. Okay, good idea, actually. Maybe you could just, I think the economic term is hypothecate that money specifically to that cause, and it would come from that particular group who, by all accounts, are very, very happy to do that. Mark says, Ian, it's incredible when, as a Brit, we land at London Heathrow, for instance. We often have the pain to go through. Being an honest legal citizen is clearly the wrong way to live. I'm always confused about the passport. We mucked up last year. It was around about a year ago, last March, I think, when we were due to go on holiday and didn't realise our youngest passport had run out. And curiously, we'd actually just renewed our older boy's passport. Anyway, so we couldn't go. There was no way around. Literally no way. You're suddenly hit with this thumping realisation, the brutality of officialdom in all of its glory. Even if it's right that this is the way it's done, it's still brutal if you're on the receiving end. And we looked at it and thought, well, let's ring. Well, you ring the number. This was a Saturday. We were flying on the Sunday. So nothing's open. It takes longer to process even an emergency passport. An emergency passport isn't done within the hour. It's done within, maybe a few days if you're lucky. But not with it was never going to happen. There's no way around it. And you always think, really, 21st century? You have to physically have this bit of paper in your hands that you show like it's 1926, and away you go with your little... That's the only way for this? Or you could travel on a boat and nobody will say a word. Don't need any papers. Derek's in Manchester. What have you got for us, Derek?
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
Basically, you've got to realise what you're dealing with here. These people, the majority of them, have actually broken into the country. So straight away, the criminals, don't care what anyone says about that, the criminals, they've come in, they've broke their way into this country. Well,
you're not a criminal if you claim asylum, are you? That's the problem.
Well, no, but how can you claim asylum when you've come through several safe countries? For a start, you're supposed to claim asylum in the first safe country you come to.
Well, that's what I keep saying, but then every now and again somebody contradicts me and says, oddly, no, you don't have to.
At the end of the day, unless France starts persecuting them, or perhaps the Isle of Man starts persecuting people, or Guernsey, or where, then we haven't got a single genuine asylum seeker. So they should be treated exactly as they are. The criminals, they've broke into the country. They've come in knowing that they were breaking our laws by landing on our beach without a passport. And at the end of the day, that being the case, they should be kept. Rather than spending money on private, I don't know, there might be MPs' mates who own these hotels, Belvoir hotels,
Possibly.
or whatever. But at the end of the day, instead of giving millions to them and getting backhanders for that, why don't they build a proper detention centre? Not a hotel, not luxury accommodation, a detention centre with the basic accommodation for them. Fair enough, feed them. You've got to feed them, I'm afraid, by all means. But they're not going wandering on our streets. They're being kept in a detention centre right at the coast, ready to jump back on the boat when they've fed up and they've had enough. Simple as that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Nothing.
Yeah, well, we've kind of convinced ourselves that, there are... And again, look... There is such a thing as a genuine asylum seeker. I get that. I just don't believe that there's 38,000 of them stuck in hotels. Do you?
Of them at all, because as I say, if you're a genuine asylum seeker and you're genuinely fleeing war, then I'm very sorry, but the first safe country you come to, you're going to be quite happy with that.
Well, you might think so. If you're, I can't. You're bang on that point, Derek, because I've made that to people and had screaming rows on air and off air on that very point of saying, look, if you were fleeing death and persecution, surely you wouldn't go, right, I've got to... I mean, I understand it's complicated. I understand that would mean, for example, if you were coming from North Africa, anywhere from Eritrea upwards, you would probably end up in Spain or Italy. Those countries can't take everyone, I know that, but as the asylum seeker, in inverted commas, surely you're running away from death. I don't imagine you'd reach the shores of southern Italy, which is very nice, by the way, and go, oh, great, I've finally got away from the killers who want to cull my family. What do I do next? I think I'll go to Middlesbrough. Really? That's a bit weird, isn't it? That's a genuine question. If this was a court case, that will be up there as Exhibit 1, 100%. 0344 499 1000. Thank you to Derek. More calls on the other side of the news at 2.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, we are discussing that hotel firm housing asylum seekers have trousered 700 million quid a year of your money. The Tories set this arrangement up, by the way. Some reportedly enjoying all sorts of perks like cooking lessons, fitness classes, a bit of fencing, some English lessons as well. It's not a bad old life over there at the Asylum Hotel setup, it seems. We're asking this question, though. Asylum hotels, what are the alternatives? If you had to remove everybody from those hotels, where would you put nearly 40,000 people? That number, by the way, is not going to go down anytime soon. It will rise over the weekend. Also this afternoon, the number of shoplifting offences has surpassed 500,000 for the first time on record. Latest figures revealing with snatch thefts of mobile phones and bags surging by 70% to a 20-year high of 99,000 cases in 2024. There's a lot of dirty old tea leaves out there. No intention of, they never go to work, no intention of paying for stuff, and nicking has become, you know, fairly normal, standard. Don't even get the emergency services always responding, not because they can't be bothered, because half the time nobody rings them. And Chancellor Rachel Reeves has said that Britain's EU trade is more important than with the US ahead of a meeting in Washington today to address President Trump's tariffs and other things too. Who is our greatest trading partner, the EU or the United States? Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This comes in from David, who says there's an important point that is missing from the immigration debate, and which manifests itself in people being called racists. Ordinary people who've lived in provincial towns from their youth have seen in the last 15 years a massive and rapid transformation. I can now walk 1 mile from my house and never hear an English language spoken, never mind an English local dialect. People can see this in front of their eyes. Whether statistics are true or not doesn't matter. We see this. David, that's a very, very racist thing to say. Outrageous, in fact. Please don't ever... I'm jesting. He's right. The cultural factor, for some reason, is seen as a nuisance in this social assimilation, you know, cohesion, you name it. It's not really flagged as kind of one of the major issues. It's sort of added in as a bit of like a kind of an amendment to the discussion. I would argue it's pretty darn central to the discussion. Like right bang central to this, as David correctly identifies. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day. Oscar Redrop is a former number 10 advisor, back with us on the programme. Oscar, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you doing, Ian?
All good, thanks. Yeah, nice to have you with us. I mean, we start, why would we not? And of course, this has been discussed many times. You and I have discussed this many, many times. The revelation that one hotel contract is worth 700 million quid a year, taxpayers' money. It's an incredible amount of money. 210 hotels that are used by this group, the Stay Belvedere Hotels Limited. There is an argument to say, well, don't blame them. I mean, it's nice work if you can get it. Trebles all round, frankly, if you run that particular emporium. You'd never be that busy consistently all year round. So they've done all right out of it. This, of course, happened under the last government. We can't even blame Keir Starmer on this, Oscar, which disappoints me massively.
Well, yeah, I mean, me too, Ian. But you have to remain completely objective with these things politically. And I would be really intrigued to know who briefed the story out, because it would be interesting if it was actually some of the Labour advisors, some of the Labour media advisors out there who just want to consistently remind people that the immigration problems that they see in their communities is largely due to an overhang of incompetence that we did see with the Tories. I think when the contracts like this are handed out, I mean, to be generous, it just spoke of probably a bit of panic that was going on with the Tory government and not clear thinking. And absolutely, you know what? And I think it was Dave, you said, who texted you just now. Yes. You know, it's so visceral. It's like an injustice that people see absolutely shoved in their face. And when they see, hear, read stories like this, I mean, I don't want to be too over the top about it, but it's quite heartbreaking for people, because even as an individual, if you're doing okay in your life and you're paying in, you're getting okay, and you're getting by okay, you'll at least know someone who has been completely, let go of by the state and is struggling. And yet you see people kind of, quite genuinely, when you read the story, like living it up. And it just cuts to the core of, like, it's just morally wrong.
When you were working, I think I've asked you this before, Oscar, but you just give us a little bit of a kind of inside view, as it were, of how serious was this really taken? I mean, right up to the Prime Minister. I don't know whether the Prime Minister himself would have, at the time, been told, oh, by the way, we're about to sign a £700 million contract with a hotel chain to try and address this problem, or whether that would be simply signed off much lower down. How important did it rank in terms of sort of day-to-day discussions?
Well, when I was there, Rwanda was the fixation. It was, get the deterrent done, think outside the box, something that would be, and it's the language that people were using at the time, maybe internally at least, was that this was kind of world leading and kind of ahead of its time, the first of its time. And I think all this other stuff, I honestly, in my heart of hearts, I sometimes think it was civil servants sat round a table, people turning a blind eye to things, signing things off, thinking no one will care. The Sun newspaper, they won't dig into this, and if they do, maybe it's in a few years' time. Whatever, panic stations, mixed with, and it's a horrible phrase because it's become such a cliche, but it is a thing. That blob of just, oh, okay, yeah, we'll sign that off. That's okay. That's only a little bit of taxpayers' money, and it's really interesting politics now. And I think Trump's kind of led from this with, Elon Musk in America, like the cost to the taxpayer. And even in this country, I think Rupert Lowe's actually spoken very, very sharply on it. Yeah. And I think that's changing now. I think rightly there's an injustice that's felt, and taxpayers want to know what every single bean of their money is going. And you read a story like this, and I'd like to think that the window has shifted over and governments would not get away with this now.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? You'd think that the minute that came in on to someone's desk, in whatever department it would have come under, one would assume the Home Office, but it might be in that Venn diagram. There's lots of interconnected departments, as you know. Did somebody faint on that day? You might imagine the paramedics were called. Somebody would remember the moment when the hotel contract was signed.
Yeah, I honestly, I really, I wasn't in those rooms. Not that I'm trying to, shift off responsibility, but I genuinely wasn't. But in my heart of hearts, I think the machine just takes over. It's something Dom Cummings also talks about very well, like the system being broken and people with pens signing things off without any care or thinking to the taxpayer. Yeah. And I hope, I really hope, and I don't care what colour the government is, if it's Keir Starmer's Labour government, whatever, I hope that era is coming to an end now.
Yeah, well, we hope so. We will we'll watch with interest, because Labour say they are going to, stop using many of these hotels, but that will, like the proverbial air bubble, that will just put the problem somewhere else. It'll pop up with local authorities or whoever having to try and, or being told that they have to accommodate some of these people. But it certainly isn't going away anytime soon. Second story here, Oscar. Yvette Cooper considering this one-in, one-out youth mobility scheme. It's seen by some as a Brexit U-turn. Germany are very much, very animated about this. Again, I think this is something that Rishi Sunak was also considering. This is under 30s. It's not full freedom of movement, but if you're under 30, we can go and work in Spain, France, wherever we like, and those people can come and work here. So it's not anyone. It's just that one group. But it has still raised some suspicions as to, hang on, why is Germany so animated and fired up about this? This is the same country that has a disproportionate amount of under 30s who have sought asylum in that country. Are they considering offloading some people? Is that their thought process? What's happening here, Oscar?
That's really interesting, and you're absolutely right to pick up on Rishi Sunak's kind of softening on it towards the end of his government. I'm personally, I'm relatively relaxed about it, but it's not. It's less about the issue itself, and it's more about, I think Keir Starmer has spent maybe it's 15, 16 visits over to the EU since he's became prime minister. I mean, there was a real period of time where it felt like that's all he was doing, meeting, and he talks about he wanted to have a reset amongst European leaders in the EU after he got into power. But actually what it felt like was ultimately a diluting of Brexit. And they might be like small chess pieces and small pawns, but that bit by bit, agreement, a softening here, a softening there. And all of a sudden, 2016, and that vote becomes less and less relevant. And I do sometimes think with things like this, that there is an element within, I've been quite fair to the Labour government in terms of the immigration issue there, just previously. But on stuff like this, I really feel like Keir Starmer and his Labour government hope that the public, or at least a decent swathe of it, stop caring about Brexit. And that they have their meetings in Number 10 and they think, you know what, I don't think it's a priority for voters anymore. If we just realign a few little things here and there, I think we could probably get away with that in the current climate. And so that's more my concern with when you hear stories like this. Maybe not in this exact case. I'm personally quite relaxed about something like this. I think there are advantages to it, but it's what it symbolizes and what's potentially coming down the track.
100%. And Keir Starmer, as you rightly say, Oscar, spent so much time in the EU since being prime. I think he was there so often. I think he was briefly the mayor of Brussels at the beginning of the year. I mean, he was there so often. But of course, he agitated so much against the Brexit vote in opposition, and as a lawyer as well. He was trying to mobilise all manner of arguments and legalese around the rights and wrongs and what we could and couldn't do. So I think it's fairly natural that a bit of suspicion falls upon him when we talk about this. I mean, I agree with you. I'd like my kids, the idea that my kids, when they get to that age when they want to go travelling, that they can just nip on a boat and go over to Spain and France, Germany and enjoy those countries. I love the idea in principle. Had it not been for Brexit and Keir Starmer's position, had it not been for a huge immigration problem, I would be as relaxed as I think you would be on this.
And let's get it right. I mean, Keir Starmer as a leader has his pros, but he's not imaginative. He's not a creative thinker, and he will revert back when he's under stress and under pressure to things that he feels comfortable and relaxed in, which is the EU, which is kind of that. When we talk about things like the ECHR and problems that might be needed to sort out immigration, he will revert to type. He'll want to speak to EU leaders. He'll want to kind of create a sense of community and all this kind of soft EU stuff, which has failed us for years and years and years. That's where he will revert to. He will revert to type, and with Rachel Reeves talking about how the things we need to do for the economy, I think he'll use that as a justification for a lot of the watering down we see with our relationship with the EU.
And of course,
strengthening.
Absolutely, and in an interesting bit of timing, Ursula von der Leyen was in Downing Street just yesterday, having a bit of a tea and sandwiches and a couple of vol-au-vents with the Prime Minister. Not for the first. I appreciate that she is the president of a bloc of countries, and presidents and prime ministers do meet other leaders, so it could just be that. But you can't blame us for being a bit suspicious. And then you factor this next story in as well, Oscar. Rachel Reeves talking about EU trade being more important than the US. It does sort of depend on who you listen to, doesn't it? I think collectively we might do a bit more with the EU, but America is a very, very important trading partner, our single biggest trading partner on the planet. What do you read as being the reality of that? Is it the EU or is it the US that is more useful to the pound in our pocket?
Well, not to cop out, but it shouldn't be. If you are truly skilled and imaginative as a leader in a government, it shouldn't be either or. You don't have to pick one. And I think it's incredibly tone deaf at this moment in time for the government to be saying that, because if you look at the place that Starmer got Trump into, or Trump got Starmer into, probably more accurate, over the last couple of months. It was actually okay. And I know, with my predispositions and maybe several of your listeners, a lot of your listeners, they'd want to jump down, Starmer's throat on struggling to kind of manhandle someone like Trump, but he did okay. But when you hear that the government's saying this now, if you're Trump and JD, and you just go, all right, fine, you have the EU then, see you later. Because, fine. And they are obviously, as we know, America are no fans of the EU in this present day. And I just thought that was a really, really tone-deaf thing to say. The opportunities that are afforded to us in America are vast, and it will take a bit. It would take a bit of time, and it almost felt like after all the press pack, and you remember the Zelensky meetings, and through the prism of Ukraine, Russia, Trump, and that diplomacy that Starmer was embarked on. Now that's kind of, for the time being, died down a little bit. Like I said, it just feels like Starmer just goes, oh, that actually, you know what? That challenge is too difficult. I don't think, I don't want to touch Trump. Too difficult. I will revert to type in the lovely, cozy EU. Yes, I'll have some lovely visits, and we'll maybe discuss a few. We can give you A, you can maybe chuck us B. As we know, you get nothing. We've been mistreated by the EU for a long old time. And I think if they shut the gates to the opportunities that are afforded to a potential trading partner like the US, it will be a real economic error from the government.
Yeah, 100%. Just a final one. Only a day after we talked about Nigel Farage describing his reaction, or Reform members' reactions, as Mr Farage saw it, that having some sort of pact with the Tories is a revolting idea. We're now hearing that he's signalling Reform UK could work with the Tories at a local level. Previously, he's rejected coalition deals. Of course, he's outlining priorities for local partnerships, including auditing council spending, tackling pothole contracts, blah, blah, blah. But he said for the first time, really, maybe we could get something going on here.
Really, really interesting. And this is just thematically in politics. The closer we get to the election, this is going to become, more, this is going to take up more and more pages in the newspapers and more conversations on the airwaves. Yeah. I think ultimately it's almost like a game of chicken, because as the polls, and locals, there's an interest there, but that will kind of swoop and die quite quickly. And we're still a way out from the election. But it does make you think, the right at some point are going to have to look at the numbers and look at the polls as we're, on the precipice of the next election, let's say. And they're going to have to make a decision, because it's going to be really clear. 100%. It's either going to be we unite, or there is another 5 years of Keir Starmer. Yeah. And it's just going to be clear as day. And that at that moment in time, there is going to have to be serious conversations. Yeah. Because yes, the right can cut its nose off to spite its own face, but then we get another 5 years of Keir Starmer. And I think we, and this is a really interesting first step to it, but I think, and of course we saw the leak from Rob Jenrick a few days ago, where he discussed, uniting the right. But I think we will see it's almost like flirting, a little bit of political flirting between the two. And the softening from Farage, I don't think people should read too much into. I think he's still going to feel very confident ahead of these locals. But I think it's a sign, it's an indication, it's a sign of things to come. Because, like I said, Keir Starmer in the chamber the other day, you could see him saying, Farage is going to eat the Tories for breakfast. He wants to pit the right against each other. And we can either, I say we, the royal we, the right can either fall into that Labour trap, or they can think really, really cleverly about this. And it's going to be fascinating. And the temperature, and we're only going to see more and more stories like this the closer we get to the election. And then there'll be a crunch point. The guillotine will come down. Indeed. We'll have to make a decision.
Yeah, because this story isn't going to suddenly disappear. It will intensify right up to 2029. So absolutely something is going to happen here, isn't it? Listen, Oscar, we hit the clock. Great to have you on. Have a cracking weekend. Enjoy the sunshine as well. Oscar Redrop, former advisor over there at Number 10. Thank you to him. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Back to the question, the Asylum hotels, what are the alternatives to that? Anything else you've heard you might want to pick up again on the Tory Reform Pact idea? Mr Farage just coming up with a little bit of a a few lukewarm suggestions as to what they might be able to do with the Tories at a very local level. And Yvette Cooper considering the one-in, one-out EU youth mobility scheme. What fundamentally would concern you about that? Is it something that ain't a bad idea? If you're 20, you might want to go travelling. Seems rather good in that respect. But are you suspicious that actually Mr Starmer and Yvette Cooper's thinking here isn't actually that? It's not about, you know, getting behind the backpackers of the future. This is more about yet another arrangement with the EU. Thoughts on that as well? 0344 499 1000.
Take my local corner shop guy, for example. He's regularly being targeted and doesn't report it because it might be 6, 7, 8 quid that he's lost, and he knows it'll take him so much time to fill in the online form.
Right.
Quite simply, he'd rather be serving customers trying to make up his losses. Now, if that's a bit unscientific, I know, but roll that out across the country, and I'm utterly convinced there are many, many more offences of shoplifting that are just simply not being reported.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Comes in from James. I'm not sure of the context of this, who's tweeted me at Ian Collins UK. And says, do you honestly believe that the average immigrant crosses through Europe with £3,000 to £4,000 in his pocket to pay some random smuggler to get him across the English Channel to Dover? I'm not sure what the implication. I think there's meant to be an implication in that. I'm not sure what it is, other than is James suggesting that it's a far more industrial scale organised crime issue? I don't know. Give us a bit of context, James. Thank you for that. This one from Reese, who says, I've got a plumber friend who's refitting heating systems in government-contracted asylum hotels. His contract is from London to Bristol and 3 years long. He said the hotels with low occupancy are being purchased cheaply by those with the contracts and then turned into occupancy hotels for migrants. It's a complete legalised racket ripping off the taxpayer. It's not stopping anytime soon as there is too much profit being made at our expense. Fraud on a biblical scale. And Bertie makes a point that I also made in the last section. People forget that the government contractor that takes over a hotel, the local staff lose their job. The hotel is then staffed by the government contractors. They supply the food, so the local businesses suffer. No trade, no tourism, higher unemployment. Indeed, anyone that worked at those hotels, and some of them are sizable, won't be working there anymore, whether they were waiting staff, some sort of contractor working in the gym, the hairdressers, wherever it happens to be. They no longer have a job. And that's a part of the story that doesn't really get discussed enough. Let's talk to Grace down in London on this issue. How are you, Grace?
I'm very blessed, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, you heard the phrase fraud on a biblical scale. There's not a huge amount of fraud in the Bible. There is quite a bit about migration, and we are called to care about people from other places. That's the point of the parable of the Good Samaritan, that we are called on by Jesus. When Jesus says love your neighbours, he doesn't actually mean the people next door. He's actually specifically referring to people from elsewhere. Now, it's clearly the case that some people who are coming over here should not be coming over here, but there are some other people coming who are fleeing desperate situations, and the government needs to do a better job at distinguishing between them. But I think that we do need to talk more about the fact that so much taxpayers' money is going to contractors and going to people who make money off of shares because they've invested in contractors. It's a real mess. I saw a long investigation into this thing with hotels a little while ago by the Times, and it's not just the hotels, but it's the organisations that funnel people into the hotels. You know, I think Serco is one of them, but outfits like that.
Yeah,
yeah.
You know, G4S, those kind of people.
Middlemen who are making a packet.
Yeah.
And it's like that with so many state services. And when people talk about things in this country getting worse, I mean, we need to consider the fact that our standard of living in Britain is still far better than it is for most humans on the planet. We do still have a better state and better quality of life than many other people do. But the reason that things are getting worse, I don't think is primarily because of migrants coming over here. I think one of the big things that doesn't get enough attention is how much public money is being funneled off into shareholders' pockets via various contractors and middlemen, and so many things being done inefficiently.
It's quite extraordinary. Which part of London are you in, Grace?
West London, Ealing.
Oh, Grace in Ealing. Crikey, we've spoken many times. Where have you been for the last 5 years?
I've only recently gotten into listening to this station.
OK, well, that's good. The reason I asked is whether or not you live in an area where this situation of hotels affects your neck of the woods.
I've not noticed it personally, but I have Asperger's, and so I'm nearly always at home, and so it's not something I've actually given much thought to.
Yes.
Maybe if I were out and about more often, I might see more people and have a better understanding of the local area.
Quite possibly, but you're right. I mean, it is the whole thing is a mess. The whole thing with government contracts. I think there's a whole other debate there, isn't there, about the thing I've never understood about those big, you mentioned Serco and Capita and G4S, these kind of companies. They only really deal with governments. They're only clients are really governments, so you'd think that governments could get the most favourable deal from these people, but they always seem to sign these almost immovable contracts that if the government decide to cut ties with them, they've got to pay them a squillion quid for the privilege.
Yeah, it's absurd, and there are so many things that are provided by the state that they have to provide, but ultimately some kind of middleman or corporation with shareholders and investors is taking a big cut of taxpayers' money, and I think that more and more things are being run poorly. We've got public sector workers not necessarily being paid a lot of money, but still the services that they provide seem to be getting worse. And I'm pretty sure it's because more and more of the money is ending up with these different contractors in the middle, and there's not enough said about it.
There it is. Grace, great to speak again. Thank you for that. Grace down in London on the issue with migration and the huge costs that are involved in, what has got to be some kind of racket. It's probably, despite what was previously said by another contributor, it's probably all legit. It just doesn't pass the smell test very well. When you're looking at these kind of numbers, I mean, they are absolutely massive, off the scale, that as a country, we have people living on the streets. You've got kids living in homes that are really not fit for purpose, that is linked to poverty. You've got armed service personnel who've been out there serving their country, putting their life on the line, being shot at, and God knows what kind of things they have seen with their colleagues and their friends, who can't get a house. And we have this situation where you've got 40,000 people stuffed into hotels. Do you remember I think Alex Phillips mentioned this earlier, do you remember during COVID, where they managed to take homeless people off the streets and put them into hotels because they said, it's a health risk to have people on the streets. So they kind of found accommodation for some of those people when they thought they needed to. But it's so bananas. I think I'm almost tempted to think it's so weird, bizarre, unacceptable, and industrial how big and how audacious this whole thing is. £5.5, 6, 7 million pound a day of taxpayers' money. That it's kind of meant to be this confusing. So you scratch your head and think, I must have missed something here. There must be more to this. Surely this cannot be happening in the 21st century. 0344 499 1000. More from you on the way. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 0344 499 1000, 25 to 3. By the way, the voice of doom, day 16? 16? Is it 16? Day 16. Day 16, Amy, is that right? Our Amy's trying to... She's counting them on her fingers and her toes. She's only got one toe. 17, day 17. Day 17 of the Voice of Doom, the biggest mystery voice competition on British radio. Nobody has got it for 17 days or 16 days. Will it go on the 17th? Find out in about 10 minutes' time. Also this, the number of shoplifting offences has surpassed 500,000 for the first time on record. According to the Office for National Statistics, there were 516,971 offences last year. That's up 20% on the year before. Snatch thefts, mobile phones and bags, etc., have surged by 70% in a year, hitting a 20-year high. 99,000 cases in 2024. And, of course, they're just the ones they know about. It comes as Britain's most prolific shoplifter, Tanya Liddell, with 180 convictions, 180 convictions over 350 crimes, was jailed again after stealing 1,300 quid's worth of goods, including Cadbury's cream eggs. Really? From 6 shops in Newcastle during a 72-hour rampage. There's clearly some kind of disease going on. Tanya Liddell. Let's speak with Chris Phillips, former DCI in the Met Police, ex-head of National Counter-Terrorism Security. Good afternoon to you, Chris. I mean, in a way, I'm not surprised. We see these figures from time to time. We know there's a huge problem out there, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better.
No, believe me, Ian, these figures are just really the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. Shoplifting figures themselves have never been particularly accurate because stores just don't bother to report, and oftentimes they won't even know that things have been stolen until stock takes have been done later. But these figures are a real just a finger in the air, in as much as the stores are that we've had a growth in organised crime within stores, and I think stores have been told to report more often, so they're doing that. And that's the rationale behind these figures.
Yeah, and I mentioned the prolific Britain's most prolific shoplifter. Again, maybe there are others that we haven't heard of, but 180 convictions. I mean, this is another league, isn't it?
Well, it is, but there's an awful lot of them. I mean, I did some work in Epsom Town Centre a year or so ago, and they, meat from Marks and Spencer's was just being taken out in big bags. They were so brazen about it, they didn't even care if anyone saw them, and very little's being done. And if you do take away policing, if you take away the fear of being caught, if you take away the fact that if you are caught, the sentences are going to be very minimal, then you will have this lawlessness that we've really never seen in our country before. We've always had shoplifting, but never on this kind of scale.
Yeah, and I would, like you say, you don't usually. I mean, she's been to prison before, this woman. She's been given another sentence. I didn't quite catch how long she's been sentenced for, but these are not generally lengthy sentences, are they, Chris?
No, and people will say we shouldn't be putting people like this into prison, but what do you do when they are just so consistent? And listen, if she's been caught 100 times, then she's been doing it thousands and thousands of times.
Yeah.
They don't get caught very often. It's a very small number of times that they'll be apprehended. And you could go to any high street in any of our cities, in any of our towns, and they will all say exactly the same thing. This has got out of control. We've now got lots and lots of people who have no fear for the law, no fear of getting caught, and see nothing wrong in stealing from shops like this.
Yeah. Do you think there's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy here when it comes to the state, in that we've talked about it so often in the media, we've highlighted the problems, we regularly talk about how you might not get a copper even show up, often because the shop or whoever hasn't even bothered calling. Somebody has their phone nicked, they might call the police, they're more likely to call their mobile phone provider and their bank before they do anything else. Has that created a greater culture and a greater sense of confidence in those that go around thieving in this way?
Yes, it has, and we've taken away police stations in the main. We've taken away bobbies, and no one in this country has ever voted to get rid of bobbies on the beat in our high streets. A visible sign of policing, a visible sign of security. It seems old-fashioned, but actually there's a real need for knowing that someone will turn up, someone that you trust and you can talk to will turn up and will deal with your crime.
Indeed. How does it get better, though? I mean, the good and the great from all over the place has waded in on this one. The latest Home Secretary, she's not been in the job that long, but, she's quite clear, I'm going to reduce and I'm going to tackle this problem and reduce the amount of crimes. But, I mean, it's all very well saying it. I can't really see any plan as to how that works.
No, it is a societal issue, isn't it? The fact that people just don't care about crime. They don't. We've always had our shops, so where you could go in and help yourself and pay at the end of it. That's just the way our society has developed across the world, and these people will work on that. But the thing is, our prisons are full. Our police, whilst we criticise them, are actually arresting loads of people, and loads of people in prison. Prisons are full. The courts are so backlogged that if you get a case to court, then it can take months, years even, to get them convicted, and it's so disorganised. We've got to spend money on our criminal justice system, on our policing, and on our general security.
Indeed. Chris, thank you very much indeed, as ever. Chris Phillips, former Detective Chief Inspector with the Met Police and the ex-head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security as well. Thank you to him. And again, it's another one, much like the first story when we were talking about the asylum hotels. This predates this government, and these stories we were discussing 2-3 years ago about the problems as to, in fact, longer than that, the problems around particularly things like shoplifting, and then you've got snatch thefts, the mobile phone, and it's a real ache if you lose something. You know, if you lose your mobile phone, which, as we all know, I'm not, exactly educating anyone here. You lose your mobile, it's devastating for a whole number of reasons. You've got the complete ache. You can't ring anybody and say, I've lost my mobile, because you've lost your mobile. And of course, it's got your banking on there. It's got all manner of other issues and things. Generally, the thief who's nicking it, if they're one of those characters that go around on a fast bike and just whack it out your hand as you're walking down the road, probably not that interested in your data and your contacts book. They'll wipe the phone. It'll go with a collection of 50 others. And it'll be shipped off to somewhere else around the world before 6 p.m. But that theft is, it's not a small crime if you're that person. If you have your bag nicked, stuff like that, losing your identity stuff and all the paraphernalia, the annoyance that you've got to go through. Mark says, I listen to you quite regularly. What I find in your narrative is that you and your colleagues expect Labour to turn around the 14 years of mess. Things like immigration or the NHS or housing or schools, social care, crime, the courts, prison, all in 10 months. Well, I've certainly never thought they could turn anything around in 10 months. When you know how long it takes legislation to get through Parliament, Labour, whatever you state, inherited a mess from the Tories and are trying to rectify it. But it takes time. Do you honestly think reform could turn things round more quickly if they were in Labour's shoes? Now, reality will soon hit reform if they ever get the big job in government. That literally echoes my words yesterday on this very programme. Mark and others who've had the same thought. I said that turning policy around is like turning an oil tanker around. And if reform got into government in 2029, much of what they want to do could not be done in one term. But what you can judge, Mark, is direction of travel and intent. You can also look at a politician's own ideology, what they broadly stand for, what they are about, whether you sense any level of seriousness. I have not heard Yvette Cooper, and this is nothing, these stories on immigration absolutely fall into the lap of the Conservatives because they spent, we keep saying 14 years, that just identifies the length of time. 5.5 of that was in coalition, and then we had a lockdown, so even let's just say the last few years when things felt really bad. All of this stuff, the hotel contracts, it was the Tories. Increase in shoplifting and no response, that was the Tories. All of this stuff. But what I'm looking at now is a Home Secretary that has been there for, 10 months or thereabouts, saying almost nothing on channel migration. So whilst I don't expect Yvette Cooper to solve it, that will take some time, I do expect her to tell us how she's going to go about it. And I think I have the right as a citizen to judge whether I think her words on these issues are credible or not. And at the moment, I don't sense they are. But I stand to be corrected. Craig is in Oxford on this issue of migration. What are you thinking, Craig? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I think that the second that these migrants step foot on British soil, we're done for. And we need to stop that in the first place. I think last week or the week before, one of the cruise companies has gone bust. Why can't we get a big old cruise liner parked out at sea, pick them up in the English Channel, hold them round there, then sail them back round the other side of the planet? As soon as they're on our shores, they're our problem, and they're costing a fortune.
So the mistake is allowing people to hit the shore, isn't it? Because that's when the trouble really starts. Because you can't just, chuck somebody on a boat and send them back. I know people would say, well, yes, you can, but you probably can't. Even Nigel Farage has said you can't do that. So, but by dint of arriving on terra firma is the problem, right?
Exactly. As soon as they step foot on British soil, they have a right to claim asylum, no matter how they got into the country or onto the country. Yeah. And so that's what needs to stop. And as soon as they realise that they're not actually making it across the channel, they'll stop trying to cross it.
I mean, that's the bit, isn't it? You've got to make people in Calais really understand that it's going to be almost impossible to get to the UK. Right now, it's completely possible. You or I could turn up there and for £3,000 to make that journey.
Exactly, and if anyone's got defendable borders, it should be us. We're an island. there's absolutely zero excuse for not being able to defend your borders.
Yeah.
And as I say, second they're here, we're stuck with them. Was it 7 million a day in costs?
Yep.
And rising.
And rising.
On the channel, rising.
Yep.
You know, I mean, the only thing that's currently being smashed is the previous profit margins of the gangs.
Yes.
And it's the ceiling that's getting smashed on them.
How bad does it have to get? I mean, just in terms of the finances, was it got to be 10 million a day before a government minister stands up and gets really angry about this?
For a Labour government, there is no upper ceiling.
Yeah,
I don't think they'll ever.
And I sense, that, which goes back to the point I was making about people's ideological belief on these things, I don't think Yvette Cooper could, if you put her in the room and gave her some RADA training, could sound animated on this issue. I just don't think it's. I think she's got some talents. I did a bit of work with her with the Police Federation when she gave a very, very persuasive speech when in opposition. And it was very good to listen to. Opposition is very easy. You've got a lot of open goals there and you don't have to create policy because it's never going to be enacted at that point. But on this one, you're right, Craig. It's not in the blood. It just isn't there. Thank you, Craig in Oxford. Malcolm in Hampshire says, illegal immigrants. I'm getting increasingly angry about this issue, which is beginning to sound like a broken record. Firstly, the incentive has to be removed since it is illegal to land in the UK without necessary documentation. Those in breach of this requirement should be processed in something akin to a tented refugee-type basic accommodation used in emergencies, without the luxuries not enjoyed by some of our own population. Those arriving daily in huge numbers have somehow managed to fund their ticket to the promised land, costing a few £1,000s, says Malcolm. The implication must be that they are extremely unlikely to be fleeing a war zone. This is the elephant in the room, and I, for one, am angry that as a pensioner, my income tax is having to pay for what I consider to be a scam. You know, if it looks like, sounds like, then it probably is. Malcolm, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll have more from you in a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000. And of course, the voice of doom, day 17. It is the most, well, I was about to say tricky. We've never had a mystery voice go on for this long. It's day 17. Will it go? Will somebody win it today? Find out next on Talk.
We were subjugated to their lawmaking by majority vote in the Council of Ministers of making of the laws against the United Kingdom, and at the same time we were actually being put in a position of being subjugated to their decision making and their lawmaking. That is the key position, and that is what is going on at the moment. As far as I can see, they're going to take us back if they possibly can.
Yeah.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
10, just gone 10 to 3. So here we go. Voice of Doom, day 17. Got to get a winner for this. I mean, if I'm getting fed up with it, I don't know how long this thing can go on for. We've given you a couple of... Remember, the Voice of Doom is always a political voice of some kind. So it could be a politician or somebody obviously connected to the world of politics, past or present. I've told you it's not David Cameron, it's not Jacob Rees-Mogg, it is not... Who's the other one that keeps coming up? Ian Duncan Smith is another one. It's not any of those people. So this person was a politician, OK? Who is this?
Political decisions were taken.
Any ideas? Now, don't phone in, because we haven't got any prizes. We don't do prizes on this. This is far too an important, stylish, intellectual challenge where we give away a speedboat or something for a correct answer to a voice. So very simply, identify 87222 if you want to have a crack. 87222. Here's the voice again.
Political decisions were taken.
There it is. Political decisions were taken. But who is that person? I've said this before. We've had harder ones than this, and they've gone in a day or two. This has now gone on for 17 days, and nobody can identify who it is. Is it the most famous politician? No, but very few of the ones we do are the most famous, which is why it makes it a bit confusing to us. If we get a winner, we will tell you after 3 o'clock who it is. Meantime, guess away. Who is this?
Political decisions were taken.
Come on. 87222 if you think you know. Back to your calls. Ian is down in London. Ian, what have you got for us? Hi.
It's not me as the mystery voice, I promise you.
Are you sure about that? It could be. Who knows?
I don't know.
Fire away.
No, it's... Right. Hi, Ian. Sorry, let me take that off that because you'll go... No, I've just come back from France, and it's very funny. I was in a bar there yesterday with a French guy and a German guy, and they're laughing at us. They're absolutely rolling around on the floor with the whole thing with the immigration. They just think it's a joke. And it came up about this whole business of doing, like, with the children. Yeah. What their hope is, they'll take all the immigrants in and give the jobs that some of the immigrants are trying to do in Germany and France, they'll give back to the young kids there because they can't give their own jobs. That's what's really causing it. They want to sort of open the borders because they know not many English guys and girls will go, not anywhere near the amount that they'll try and push over to here.
So
and
it's it's a recruitment.
Yeah. It's just recruit, like, sort of like, oh, look, you can go over to England now. Yeah. They'll give you a job.
Yeah, but a lot of these guys, I mean, what sort of job would you get if you don't? I mean, a lot of these guys don't speak English at all. I mean, some will, but many don't.
Yeah, but they're not interested because somebody or somewhere, you know, like going back to the Turkish bar and all this sort of stuff, they don't speak a word in there.
True.
So they'll do it like that. And as for somewhere, where do you want to put them up? Don't worry, Gary Lineker's got a place abroad, so we could really get him annoyed and put them in with him there. Let him put them up as opposed to the hotel.
Well, Gary Lineker's apparently got a very big house, so I think everybody could live at Gary's place, couldn't they?
Oh, and if they can't get in at Gary's place, they can use Gary Neville's hotel.
Yeah. That's right. Maybe the hotel is near Gary. Do you have to be called Gary to do this kind of stuff, by the way?
No, you've got to be a Gary.
Got to be a Gary. This country needs more Garys. It's got to be... It's got to be...
Do you know what the funny side to that is?
Go on.
Very quickly. Do you remember the episode with Fools and Horses where the guy came over and they kidnapped him? They thought and they kept on calling him Gary.
Yes, they did, didn't they? That's right. Gary, it is. Listen, great call, Ian. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go to not Gary, but Gordon in Bristol. What have you got for us, Gordon? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thank you for taking the call.
Pleasure.
Look, you're a bright, well-connected guy in politics and current affairs. Maybe you put me right. What am I getting wrong? These guys, the immigrants that we have arriving on our shores, they've first of all got into the EU through Greece, Spain, Italy, France, whatever. illegally. So they're illegal in France and in the EU. Okay? And because of Schengen, nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
They're allowed to roam. Nobody checks where they are. So they end up at Calais illegally. They're illegal in France. And then they try and export them to us. Hang on, France. These are your illegal problems, not ours. You don't need ECHR. You don't need to go to a third country to process them. They shouldn't be here because it's France's problem. It's the EU problem. And maybe we should do a trade deal with France or with the EU and say we will not accept your migrants as part of the trade deal.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does sort of take you into that kind of territory. It does come back, though, Gordon, and I promise you I don't know the answer to this, but I keep hearing that if you claim the minute you claim asylum, you're not illegal. Well, if you come across on a boat, the argument I always give, if you came to Heathrow Airport and jumped over the barrier, you'd be arrested. Yeah. But if you said, I'm claiming asylum, then that changes the status of your position.
Yes, but you can't claim asylum in England when they're in France.
I think I'm told you can claim asylum wherever you want to.
What, for England?
Anywhere you like. If you can get there.
They can only claim it for the country they're in.
Well, that's what I was always led to believe. And whenever I've challenged somebody on that, they say, no, you can claim it anywhere.
I want to claim asylum in the United States, so therefore I have... It's rubbish. Nonsense. You can't do that.
Well, you wouldn't think so.
You can only claim asylum for the country that you're in. And once you're in this country, I agree, just don't let them in. It's France's problem.
Yeah.
Come back.
Listen, Gordon, it just compounds the confusion around all of this, Gordon, in Bristol. I've had that argument with so many lawyers who will tell you, no, you can claim. There is nothing that compels you to bring a single piece of identity with you, no passport. If you are claiming asylum, by definition of that claim, then you can go to wherever you feel as a citizen the safest. And I think, no, surely it's the first place you land, because, you claim asylum because you're about to be killed or have your head cut off. You don't start getting all discerning about where you're going to live, you wouldn't think, as long as it was safe. We'll leave that one hanging. Maybe you can respond on that. Voice of Doom, I'm hopeful after the news we have a winner on the Voice of Doom. It's day 17. So far, no one's got close. Very simple question. Who is this?
Political decisions were taken.
Let's play it one more time.
Political decisions were taken.
Who is that? It's a politician. Not currently, but back in the day-ish. Lines are open. You can text in on that 87222. Right now, news at 3 o'clock.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? And we'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Give it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back to the home of Common Sense. Coming up on 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. As you've been hearing, you've been following the show so far, that hotel firm housing asylum seekers, trousering £700 million a year. You almost have to laugh. From taxpayers. Some reportedly staying there, getting all sorts of perks. You get some cooking lessons, bit of tennis, fitness classes, English lessons, jousting, I'm sure, is on there as well. Maybe some water skiing on a good day. Who knows? That aside, it's the 700 million quid I think you've got a bulk at. We'll have more details on that. Asylum hotels, what are the alternatives, by the way? If you said, OK, close all the hotels, where do you put nearly 40,000 people? Also this afternoon, President Trump insisting he was applying a lot of pressure on both Russia and Ukraine to reach a peace deal, despite stating that Crimea will stay with Russia as part of the US's peace proposals. What's to be done about that is the question, of course, the world are asking. And campaigners and parents have slammed Ofcom's new online safety rules, accusing them of prioritising big tech profits over children's welfare. Man, this is a nest of vipers, this one. And if you've got kids and they're coming into that world of technology, got an iPad, maybe a Switch, but of course ultimately want their own phone, etc. What do you do in that respect? Yes, it's parental responsibility, but the tech companies have to do a bit, surely. 0344 499 1000. Right, let's move to it then. Voice of Doom, day 17. I'm hopeful we've got a winner, OK? This is the voice that you have to identify. Here it is.
Political decisions were taken.
Political decisions were taken. Some of the answers we've had in. Alistair Jack. That's a name of old. No. Greg Osborne. Who is Greg Osborne? I don't know who Greg is. Alistair Campbell, it is not. Gavin Williamson, no. Chris Whitty, David Gork, Zach Goldsmith, it isn't. Ken Clark, doesn't sound anything like Ken Clark. Gordon Prentice, no. David Miliband, no. Matt Hancock, no. We have not got a winner. I'm absolutely staggered. I might have to give a bigger clue on Monday when it returns for day 18. Flipping 18. I mean, it's tricky. Ain't that hard. Say that again, Adam. All right, we've got some guesses on text as well. Kenny in Edinburgh. Is the voice of doom your missus? Being married to a miserable git like you must feel like doomsday. Oh, flipping heck, Kenny, you got the right answer. It is, actually. Yes, it's her. He's only gone and won. Send him a puppy. And 50 quid. Sadly, Ken, it ain't. But it's back on Monday when it'll be day 18. Maybe we'll get a winner then. Let's move to this story. Donald Trump claiming he's putting a lot of pressure on Russia because there's been some criticism. Why all the fingers pointing at Ukraine? He says, well, no, I'm putting a lot of pressure on them to strike a peace deal. Of course, there is a proposal from Trump that Crimea remains with Russia. His envoy, Steve Witkoff, is set to present the US president's 7-point peace plan in a Kremlin meeting, his third with Vladimir Putin in 4 months. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer has argued that Ukraine alone must determine the terms of any peace agreement, directly challenging Trump's approach. Let's speak with Malcolm Nance, former US Navy intelligence officer and author of the book, The Plot to Betray America, How Team Trump Embraced Our Enemies, Compromised Our Securities, and How We Can Fix It. Good afternoon to you, Malcolm. That is the longest book title in the world, isn't it? I have to say.
You should see my latest one. One thing you did miss is that I was a Ukrainian Army Legionnaire. I fought on the Ukrainian Army side for almost a year.
Yeah, absolutely. You know this area well. You know this story well, too. Look, I can't work out your president. I'm not the first person that said this. Of course, there was the big moment in the Oval Office with J.D. Vance and Trump where they decided to give Zelensky a bit of a public lashing. It wasn't pretty. I don't think anybody wanted to see that. Then the next day, or a couple of days after that, Mr. Trump was going, no, it's going to be fine. And then he said he had a phone call with Zelensky and it's all looking good. We're going to do the mineral deal. Don't worry. The guy's come around to my way of thinking. And then he, 2 days ago, starts going almost back to where he was. No, Zelensky's not playing, he's playing with fire, or words to that effect. Very little criticism of Russia, it seems, but he says He is putting a lot of pressure on them. Maybe, though, it seems, Malcolm, he's just not doing it publicly. And that question was as long as your book title. There you go.
Well, you know, every Thursday I do a podcast with Michael Cohen and Lev Parnas. One was his lawyer for 25 years, and the other was his negotiator in Moscow in Ukraine. And we call this Two Felons and a Spy. But we sit down and we realize that everything Donald Trump does, every decision he makes, is made for his financial benefit. He does not care about ideology, with one exception. He believes that Moscow is this ginormous pool of untapped hundreds of Russian billion dollars. And he wants access to that. This is why he sent Steve Witkoff, who's supposed to be his Middle East negotiator, but he's in fact a very, very long friend of Trump, who is a real estate tycoon. And this goes back to the original story of Trump Tower Moscow, which he tried to get in 1988. And thing goes back to Trump just wanting money and a Nobel Prize. He actually thought that he deserved a Nobel Prize for proposing the START treaties back in 1988, and he's very jealous of Barack Obama's Nobel Prize, which he got in his first year. So Trump has become obsessed with these two things: huge quantities of Russian money and a Nobel Prize for solving a war he claimed he would solve in a day.
Is it possible that, look, the one thing we know about Trump is that he's unconventional. The attraction to many voters was exactly that. This idea that he's not establishment is nonsense. He couldn't be more establishment if he tried. But he is outside of the Capitol Hill mob, if you like. He stands out. He's not been a professional politician all his life. He wasn't a bag carrier back in the day for Richard Nixon or something like that. You know, this guy came to it from a slightly different angle, and that is why people like him. The defenders of Trump will say, look, it seems like it's a bit weird and it looks a bit odd, but he's going to solve this. And when he does, you, Malcolm, and others will go, I have egg on my face, I got it wrong, Trump's a hero. There you go, Donald, there's your Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, there is not one bit of evidence that anything Donald Trump said that he is going to do has ever occurred, with the exception of giving the single largest tax cut to billionaires in American history. Can we stipulate something here that everyone knows? Donald Trump is without all question the single most documented liar in American history. That's 33,000 when he was president the first time, as many as 25,000 in the interim, and he's now pushing 50,000.
But can't you do, you can do that with any politician, can't you, Malcolm? You can look at any politician and read every word or sentence or sinew and go, oh, in an interview with the New York Times, he once said he went to Wyoming in March, and it turns out he actually went there in April or something.
Yeah. But
that counts as a lie, doesn't it?
No, it counts as, there's difference between misgivings and misrepresentations and misthought. Donald Trump's a pathological liar. I mean, he just lies for the sake of lying because he only presents his case to the people who are immediately in front of him for the gratification of what's occurring in front of him. And again, I get this from his top two closest friends. Trump is not going to get the Ukraine war.
Your line has sadly got the better of us. We will try and get you back on, Malcolm. Something within the, I don't know, maybe it's Trump Towers thought, oh my God, they've got Malcolm Nance on. He's a former US Navy intelligence officer, very high-ranking, very respected man. He might say some bad things against Donald, so we'll scupper him with the digital police. Maybe it was that, or it could just be a shoddy line. We will try and return to him. Meantime, let me just read out some messages from you. Colin says, are we not a sovereign country? Can we not trade with as many countries as we like? They are making it out as if it's either the US or the EU. We'll have both, please. Yeah, we want a rip-roaring deal with the EU. We want a rip-roaring deal with the US, Australia, India, you name it, the whole darn lot of them. fair point as well. This one comes in from Mega Vegan, who says, so there's an agreement between to allow youngsters to move freely between the UK and the EU. Human rights lawyers get a ruling that this agreement discriminates against older people. It's ageist. So older people have to be included in the agreement. Hey presto, freedom of movement. Could it be that? Malcolm Nance is back with us. I think you were saying before we were cut off, probably by the intelligence services over there in the White House somewhere. Before we were cut off, Malcolm, you were saying you don't think Donald Trump has got a hope in hell of solving the Ukrainian problem.
Serious connection issues.
And it went down again. Listen, I think we got the broad brush of what Malcolm was telling us there. I think we can put him down as not a supporter of Trump. It's a shame we lost that line, and we will get him. We'll try and get Malcolm back on with us next week because he is a great voice. I know a lot of people will disagree very passionately with what he says. He doesn't speak at all as a man that is about to vote for Donald Trump. And that's fine, right? It's a democracy. He's got a very animated view about the Trump administration. Was it? He said he lied 50,000 times. I hear that about a lot of politicians. I'm pretty sure Biden told one or two porkies in his time. Scrap that. Thousands of them, particularly about his son and his own past and God knows what else. Nonetheless, I'm not here to defend anyone. I am here to listen to the voices, and Malcolm Nance is one of them. His line sadly beat us today. We gave it a good go. But it beat us. We will definitely try and get him back on next week. Ian Day says, afternoon, Ian. Just for a little perspective for the EU lovers, the EU has not signed up a country that is a net contributor since 1995. Interesting little factoid. Linda in West Wales says, surely I can't be the only one to be alarmed at your revelation that some of the fighting-age male migrants whose provenance and intent is mostly unknown in hotels paid for by the long-suffering taxpayer are being offered fencing lessons. I assume sword fencing, not learning a garden trade. I have to be honest, Linda, that's a bit of mischief on my part. I kept adding in more imaginative things to the list. Fencing lessons, tiddlywinks, and a hand of old maid, if you remember that as a kid. Cribbage, I think I put on there. I have to retract the fencing lesson thing, but you'd be right to be alarmed if that were to be true. Although, do you know what? I wouldn't actually be that surprised. Back to your calls. Nick, down in London. How you doing, Nick?
I'm fine, Ian. Ian, you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Not bad at all. The sun's come back out, right? So that's a good thing.
Nice?
It's lovely out there. I love it. Fire away. What have you got?
Well, the boats coming across the channel from France.
Yes.
What's stopping the Navy catching the boats, intercepting them, turning them round to French territorial waters, say 6 miles, giving them enough fuel for 7 miles, and letting them go, and on you go? I think it'll stop it pretty quickly, and I'm fairly sure, thinking back, Australia did something similar in the North Tasman.
Yes, they did do something similar. I mean, there are people that argue it wasn't similar enough to be able to do the same thing, but I couldn't say one way or the other. Isn't the argument, Nick, because I think you're 100% right, that it's not actually as easy to do that as it looks, and it's that the chance of loss of life is quite big if you try to, because those things do go along at a fair speed these days. I don't know, by the way. That seems to be the argument that comes back, which is why this conversation or this topic is so confusing for all of us, right?
2 points on that. One is some folks will always argue about anything at all. You'll always find some people arguing against something, and that's usually when they don't really want to do it in the first place. And secondly, I'm no marine expert, but I would have thought the channel was a lot safer than the Tasman Sea, or the North Tasman Sea, whatever it is, north of Australia. Greater tides, it's greater areas, and so on. So I would have thought it's perfectly doable if we have the wit and mind to actually do it. And therein, I think, lies the issue here.
I tend to, I mean, the bit that I can't get my head around, Nick, whether you do it like that or whether you have some kind of barrier. A barrier could be vessels or in whatever form. The idea that we can't stop it seems to be utterly laughable, that we cannot stop 1,000 people a day, and today the weather's good. I bet you there's a few hundred today. There'll be hundreds more tomorrow. As we sit here on Monday, I bet you the number's gone up by 2,000.
I agree, and I agree with you. I can't get my head around if we via will, we can't do it. You made the point nearly an hour or so ago that if people were jumping the barriers at Heathrow, or running off planes and running across the runway at Gatwick, that kind of thing, the media, the army, the police forces would be all over this.
Yeah.
But they're not, because it's out of sight and out of mind, and they don't want to stop it.
Nick, you make a very succinct point there at the end as well. Thank you very much. Nick down in London. Lots more to come, more from you as well. 0344 499 1000. That's where you can leave a voice note as well. You can message us on 87222. We've got tech news with Will Guyett coming up as well. There's a lot in that as well. We are, by the way, I think one day next week going to take a kind of deeper dive into how you make... they used to call them dumb phones. I think they do call them dumb phones. You can buy what they call dumb phones, essentially not smartphones, the very opposite, of course, so that your kid can't get on the internet, social media, any of that kind of stuff. But they can, play a few games, listen to music, they can have WhatsApp, they can have maps, they can do some stuff, but not all the stuff that probably ain't good for them, or certainly not good for them on any regular basis. But there's more. There's loads of ways you can either buy one of these dumb phones, which often means an extra contract, or you can make your own phone dumb. But most of the ways that I've looked into, certainly as a parent, seem to have limitations. So you can do that bit. You go, that's great. I can get rid of that. Can I get rid of that? Oh no, you can't get rid of it. So it's still there. Well, it's no good to me then. So there's a lot in that. So we're going to get Will onto that to explore some of the apps that claim to be able to dumb down your phones, that you could give it to a 4-year-old and it wouldn't cause them an issue. 0344 499 1000. More calls on the way. You're listening to Talk. It's 20 past 3.
Fair and equal is my mantra, and what's been happening, you mentioned the London Marathon. Again, people who want to stand up for women's rights are being accused of not caring about others, and women care about everybody. But what was happening is our rights in different areas were being eroded, and it wasn't about toilets, it was about sex attackers, male sex attackers who identified in a certain way. It doesn't matter who you are, what? Criminality is criminality.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Talk, 22 minutes after 3 o'clock. Let's go back to your calls and comments. This comes in from somebody who says, if all the hotels are filled with asylum seekers, how can we accommodate tourists? Bang on. I mean, that is a problem. These are hotels that ordinarily would have been just doing touristy things. They would have had people working in them as well. In some cases, in the locality, you might get 80, 100 people work in the local large hotel. Whether they're waiting staff, whether they're cleaning, whether they're chefs, whether they're reception staff. They might have a job in the hair salon that's just in the reception there, or the little bag shop or whatever it is they've got there. All that's gone. That's gone. If you're a tourist visiting a nice town where you thought, oh, there's a hotel there, I'll ring them and book it. And then you'll find out that you can't book it because it's essentially closed to people who try to book. Bill in Telford. What do you got for us, Bill? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Yes, when we were serving in the army in places like Bosnia and Kosovo, we would build what was called temporary field accommodation. And effectively what that was like a flat-packed Corimec or porta cabin, like you'd see on a building site, and then assemble it. And obviously the walls, it's all prefabricated. So you can orientate it any way you like.
I'll tell you what, Bill, stay where you are. It's the line again, but for a different reason. We'll try and get you back on a better phone line. It seems to have gone underwater a little bit. I've got Ian over here in Stockton-on-Tees. What have you got for us, Ian? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian. I'm just getting a bit tired of people ringing up with nonsense suggestions about these boats. For a starter, just a non-starter completely to put a rope on these inflatables and tow them anywhere. Yep. The first thing that they would do is start jumping over the side, which would force a rescue immediately. So you're going to get nowhere like that. Obviously, there's maritime laws that suggest you've got to save lives at sea. It's incredibly dangerous, these inflatables, and not seaworthy to start with. So it's a non-starter. So I'm just getting really, really tired of people suggesting the same things online or on radio shows or whatever, right? It's just not doable. The main problem that we have here, right, is that when Cameron et al. Destroyed the Libyan regime, that opened the floodgates to masses and masses of people from Africa, right? Nothing's been done to stem that tide. Then when they get into Europe, the Schengen Agreement allows them free travel to get all the way to Calais and obviously just park up there. There is only one response to this problem, and that is to get the French to agree to take them back. And that is the only way that you're going to do it. There is no other way. Friends of mine, and we've brainstormed this time and time again, thinking, how can we solve this problem? What is the obvious answer?
Yeah.
There isn't an obvious answer. The only way we can do it is get the French to agree to take them back and let
So they would have to. So once they've started the journey from northern France to the UK, they have to complete the journey because, like you say, the logistics of trying to do otherwise aren't possible. So they would land in Dover, for example, and then you'd then put them back on a boat back to France.
Yes, exactly. But they're going to have to make some arrangement with the French to get the French to agree to this, because it's completely undermining our security for them to just take the view that we can't do anything. And to me, that's just not acceptable internationally or politically or anything. And we got no political will to do this and to talk Turkey with the French and make the French understand. And that's the only way we can do it. I mean, it's one of the most difficult problems to solve, but that is the only obvious answer. If we get the French to agree to take them back, we put them on a ship and take them back. Flying them back is a massive expense. You've got to have 4 people for every one person on the plane. Hugely expensive, hugely time consuming. It just needs tackling. But the British public are totally fed up to the back teeth of paying this ridiculous price, which we can't afford. Don't forget, we're borrowing all this money that we're spending on putting them in the hotels for a start. We're borrowing money for everything else. It's not money that we've got in the bank. It's money that we're actually borrowing, and then we have to pay interest on this money to keep them fed and watered in these hotels. It's just completely ridiculous, and it needs to stop now.
Yeah.
And I mean, getting back onto net zero, there's another hemorrhage of money and another sense of lunacy from the government. Anybody with a brain can understand that net zero, yes, in theory it's a great idea, but practically it's just not doable. But we let Miliband et al. Go down the road with this. Net zero will eventually be cancelled because at some point it will be quite obvious that it's going to run out of money. We can't do it. Miliband will either get the sack or he will resign, but he will be gone, and nobody will take responsibility for how far we've gone up the road with it. And it's the same with the migrants. You know, nobody's going to take responsibility for anything. There's a lack of accountability across the board in government. No government ministers or politicians ever go to jail for negligence or anything like that. Then this is rank negligence.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, yeah, and we get to a point when you can say, OK, a minister can make an incorrect decision. Anyone can make a mistake. Some policies, they have a good idea, it doesn't work out. But when it's on this kind of level, and we are talking about this amount of money, millions and millions of pounds per day that we really need elsewhere, then you have to start thinking this is beyond a political misjudgment. This is flipping criminal. Ian, great call. Love it. Thank you very much indeed. We've got Bill in Telford back with us. You weren't long in, Bill, to your comments before we got cut off by a wonky phone line.
Yeah, that's Telford, I'm afraid. Dodgy phone.
Is that what it is? Yeah, maybe you're being tapped.
Yes, so essentially, yes, temporary field accommodation. It's a system of like Corimex or porta cabins that you can configure any way you like. So you can have the door wall on the end, you can have the door in the middle. So you can essentially bolt them together like a giant Meccano set, really, and you can end up with one Corimex for like 4 people, or you can bolt 2 together, 3 together, 4 together to make a dining room, a mess hall, all kinds of things. And we used to put these sort of little towns together, you know. It would take the engineers, 2 or 3 weeks to put them all together, hook up the electrics, the plumbing and all the rest of it, and you've got a self-contained little town within sort of a couple of weeks. And it's, powered by a...
Would you make more than one of those? Because I've often wondered about, it can't be that hard. These things do exist already, and there's plenty of fields and space, as you say, former army camps, etc. Would you have to build more than one? Because I would imagine there is a certain security consideration if you put 40,000 people into one place.
Well, there is that, but there's many old soldiers out there who remember a camp in Bosnia called Bondsteel, and it was made by the United States, and basically they bulldozed the top off 2 little hills, filled up the middle, and built this massive camp in it from the same sort of method, and they used to have a bus service around the camp. It was that massive. So, yes, it is perfectly doable, and you just need the will, the way, and a bit of gumption from the politics.
Yeah, well, these are ideas that, it fascinates me that, we can talk about this stuff. I know sometimes things are more complicated than, having a chat with a mate or like this or in a pub or whatever, but I simply can't believe that something like you've just suggested is not doable. I don't believe that's not doable, but for some reason the powers that be think otherwise. Thank you very much indeed, Bill in Telford, for that. It's 3:30. Will Guyot on the way. We got some great tech news, some interesting stories. Tech these days makes front pages, not just some obscure geeky page in a specified magazine or newspaper. Lots to come on that, including what Ofcom have been up to this week as well. Details coming next, right here on Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Just gone 3:30. We've got a lot to get through here. We're going to talk some tech news, and there is an awful lot of it around this week as well. Will Guy, Talk's tech correspondent, is back with us. Afternoon to you, Will.
Yeah, afternoon, Ian.
Still rocking those glasses, I see.
I still am, yes, they're still here.
Has nobody had a word with you? Or, I don't know, some sort of law enforcement or anybody stopped you and said, you can't do that, son?
These glasses don't put me on any kind of list. I'm absolutely fine.
They should put you on a list. That's what I'm saying. We need to start a new list, I think. But listen, we've got a list here, and a big, busy one as well. A list of just some really interesting tech stories, and particularly the new online safety rules, which has sparked a bit of a backlash. Tell us the story, firstly. What's happened and who's upset?
So we've been talking about the Online Safety Act for quite a while, and that's finally coming in. Now, this is something that's been kicked around from government to government. They've been talking about it for almost 15 years. It starts coming into place next month. And the idea is with this that it's going to offer extra protections to young people, predominantly online. Going to stop, underage people using accounts. It's going to protect kids from gambling content and other unsuitable stuff on the internet. But interestingly and intriguingly, as well as stopping under 18s getting to unsuitable stuff, over 18s too are going to have to prove their identity in order to get access to certain content, such as legal porn, for example. So if you're over 18 and want to go to a perfectly legal porn site, there is every chance that the owner of that site is now going to have to verify your identity in some form. They might ask for your bank card. They might ask you to, facial recognition. So a copy of your face, some details will be sent to those companies. Now, if you've got nothing to hide, some people will go, that's absolutely fine. But others are saying, hang on a minute, it's my legal right to look at this stuff. Why do I have to submit an image or be involved? But this is the challenge about keeping young people safe online, and more needs to be done. The tech companies need to step up and do more. Everybody needs to do more, actually, because families do, schools do, every society does as a whole. Everybody does. But we're in this sort of interesting place with these online safety rules because, and it's quite clearly been shown, there are still some really big gaps in what's covered here. For example, AI is not fully covered. Video games without chat functions, for example, aren't covered in the Online Safety Act. So you could have something really unsuitable going on in a video game, but you can't use the law that's just been created to protect people because it doesn't have online chat. So there's all sorts of gaps at the moment that Ofcom
How would something like that happen? Well, how did somebody, presumably in a meeting, they said we're only going to legislate if the particular game, something like Fortnite or whatever, which has an accompanying chat element to it, so you can chat away to other members, players, etc. We'll cover that, but we're not going to cover anything that doesn't have that. How would a decision like that be arrived at?
It's just, I would assume it has never been brought up properly in conversation, or it was decided that those titles didn't require policing, but then you don't get that clearly explained by Ofcom or the government. There's been examples as well of government ministers saying, we're going to investigate something, I'm going to get Ofcom to look at that. And then Ofcom have come back and said, actually, no, we can't do that under the law. So there's still a huge deal of confusion around this. And I know it's something that you and I are getting, we've been talking about, and we're looking to do some more content around this over the next couple of weeks. The idea about how do you keep young people in your family safe online, because it's very easy to say the tech companies need to do more, but what can families do if they're looking to give a child a smartphone, get somebody online, that kind of stuff?
Well, indeed. I mean, I agree, and we've had this conversation before, that ultimately I would normally almost always default to, it's down to the parents. The parents' responsibility. Everyone at some point, to a greater or a lesser extent, has used the phone or the iPad as your digital babysitter, because you know that a kid will sit there for a couple of hours and you won't hear a squeak out, and they'll be very, very happy. So yes, it is parental responsibility, but there are some things you physically can't do. And again, a conversation that we have had, trying to get rid of YouTube, for example, good luck with that. You might think, bearing in mind, now, YouTube yeah, there's some nefarious content on there, but it's not known as a place for porn or whatever. But you will find, you find quite a lot of violence if you want to watch kids being beaten up at school. You'll find people being hanged in certain horrendous countries. I think the Saddam Hussein one is probably still up. It's
a good anti-5G conspiracy.
Indeed, yeah, you'll find all of that as well. Chemtrails, they'll be there as well. So there's a lot on there, some salty language to boot, and you might just go, do you know what? I think this is probably not good for a 10-year-old. I know what I'll do. I'll get rid of it. I'll just press delete and, oh no, I can't delete it. Well, I can delete it a bit, but it will still be there in the App Store. Can I protect the App Store? Maybe, possibly. Can I get rid of it off my TV? No, I can't. It's hardwired. Something that every conversation I have with parents who've got like a 9, 10, 11-year-old child, sometimes younger, will say, I'd love to be able to get rid of YouTube off the telly. I can't get rid of it. I can password protect it, but it's still there, winking at the kid, going, come and get me. You want to get rid of it altogether. You can't get rid of it. You would think something as famous and as well known as the very conversation we're having, you could get rid of anything like that in the digital world and never see it again.
And that's the challenge. There are some steps you can take for some of these things. It's a really good example you make about YouTube, because you can't remove it from most TVs, because Google have paid tons of money to get it added to those TVs in the express purpose that you use it and start reporting information back to them that they can sell advertising against what you're doing. But we sort of find ourselves in this situation, and I know you've experienced this too, that there is a problem and tech companies have to do way more to keep people safer. But when did we all lose our sense of what's right and what's wrong in terms of digital citizenship? People sitting on trains yelling into the speaker on FaceTime with no headphones, for example, on a video chat with somebody. What's that all about? When did that become... That's never been an acceptable thing to do in public. So why on earth are we all now doing it and encouraging younger generations to do the same thing?
Yeah. It's spot on. Well, as you rightly say, we are going to do a very specific sort of deep dive into some of this area as well, particularly that whole thing of, for kids and their online safety. Again, that conversation that every parent will have about kids and smartphones or smart devices like iPads, etc. How do you de-smart them? How do you make your Samsung or your iPhone dumb? Because they are called dumb phones, of course, as in the very antitheses of smart. And they do exist, but some people just like to... You'd think, I've got an iPhone here, you'd think there'd be a button on it. You could just go, boom, and the whole thing just turns into something else. I know Apple's argue, well, we don't make them for 10-year-olds, so they shouldn't be on them anyway. But, I'd counter that with the fact that times have changed, Apple.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, and it's definitely something that we should look into, because I know that there's, listeners have got a lot of things to say about this, and I'm sure we'll get, a lot of questions and stuff when we tackle this as a feature in the future.
Indeed. And this story, tech firms face £60,000 fine for failing to remove knife crime content. I mean, again, this comes back to something we were just talking about here. Who's going to get fined? How do they police it? Is it even possible?
Yeah, this is the beginning of the Online Safety Act and the idea that the government and the regulator finally has teeth to start challenging some of these scenarios. And the idea is that if this content isn't removed within a set period of time, that 60 grand fine could apply to the UK boss of Meta or the UK boss of TikTok or whoever if their company is not complying, which seems to be a fairly strong attempt to bring them to the table, because 60 grand isn't a huge fine, but you wouldn't want to be dealing with the admin around that if you were the boss of a particular company. But this happens the same week, right, as in the EU. The EU's now got a thing which is fantastic called the Digital Markets Act, and it's the EU leading where we should follow, and we should still be in the EU for stuff like this as far as I'm concerned. But the Digital Markets Act is basically bringing all of the tech companies to the table. £500 million fine to Apple for not opening up the App Store and enabling other companies to publish apps or have a method of publishing directly to the iPhone. And Meta have been clobbered for around €200 million for the data they're collecting from European consumers. So that shows you that in Europe, they're rolling up their sleeves and they're challenging it. But the big question here is good old Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has said, I don't want other governments intervening and interfering in the work of US tech companies. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not this turns into a part of the trade war or something else that Trump gets hung up on, because he doesn't want the tech companies regulated. All the tech companies have gone full MAGA, and Mark Zuckerberg's practically wearing the "Make America Great Again" hat from China to try and show his love for Donald Trump, in the hope that his company doesn't get regulated to near non-existence in Europe and in other territories.
I mean, it is difficult. America, and they talk about their amendment and free speech, and, nobody should ever interfere with that. That's exactly how it works. But I guess, the counter-argument for many would be, we've never been in a place where the idea that you could go to a video sharing platform and find somebody, fairly graphic, very crystal clear, not grainy CCTV image of somebody being stabbed, a kid maybe being stabbed, an assault in a playground. I don't think free speech amendments have ever been tested in this kind of way before, have they? Because previously it was usually about, whether Howard Stern was a bit mucky on the radio, and that's as bad as it got. Now we're talking about stuff that's as graphic and as horrible as you can get, which is freely available for anybody to see. And again, it comes back to, it should be parental responsibility, but the idea that you're going to somehow get every parent on the planet on board, and you're never going to get that video shared among kids, and they're going to show it on the school bus, and have you not seen this? And that doesn't even get into all the sexual stuff of, what they saw a classmate do, and their bits and pieces being shared across the year. So the times have changed so significantly in the last decade that it's not unreasonable to say something in all of this has to substantially change, rather than an MP here or an MP over there or a politician on Capitol Hill having a few gripes about it. This has got to be seismic shift.
No, I think you're completely right, and there's a lot to be said about cleaning up these platforms and giving people, if people see stuff that is unsuitable that should be removed and hasn't been removed, more of that should be done. But the most interesting thing here, we're talking about the US exercising freedom of speech. It's actually the US that may break up Google, because that's another story that's ongoing at the moment. Both Google and Meta are in huge antitrust cases in the US, which are now being heard. Yeah. And the reality here is Google may end up having to sell its browser Chrome because of unfair dominance in the online marketing space. And ChatGPT, the owners of ChatGPT, OpenAI, have come forward and said, if this is up on the block, we're going to try and buy it.
Yeah. Surely ChatGPT, I thought about this the other day, I can't be the first person, ChatGPT and all the others will just become the search engines of the future, won't they?
They will, which is what makes a lot of this thing about online search dominance almost redundant, because in the next couple of years, you're just going to be asking ChatGPT to give you answers rather than the search results coming back via traditional search engines.
Yeah. Will, stay with us. We're going to talk about AI and WhatsApp, what's been going on over there, and also what is fueling or potentially fueling the rise in shark attacks. I mean, this one is so dumb you won't believe it, but it could be true. Details coming next, right here on Talk.
So if you look at the housing companies that are making lots of money, the subcontractors, which are the hotels, then you get the non-governmental organizations that get funding from the government to help the asylum applicants. Then you get those charities across the country that are really sucking off the teat of council taxpayers' money because they're also receiving it. You look into an industry, an asylum industry, that is running roughly around £20 billion a year.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Peter Cargwell's here after the news at 4 on Drive. We'll chat to Peter before then to find out what is going on. Will Guyatt, our tech correspondent, is with us as well, talking through the big tech stories. WhatsApp and their optional AI tool, Will. What's the story here?
The challenge is it's not optional, despite them saying it's optional.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting it. It's appeared in the corner of WhatsApp. If you're using it, there's this multicoloured circle, and it's the idea now that you can send questions to Meta's AI, which is called Llama. They've all got interesting names, and you can ask it questions in WhatsApp like you are messaging a human, and it'll come back to you with answers. Lots of people seem unhappy about it, suggest it's they haven't asked for it and it's been served up in the platform. Being WhatsApp so popular with over 2 billion people, any major change to it always gets some sort of response. So lots of punters have felt unhappy about it. Others have felt slightly confused that Meta have called this an optional update when you can't actually remove it at the moment, much like we were talking about, YouTube on a TV, etc. earlier on. So yeah, it's interesting to see where this will go. It actually works fairly well. And if you're a regular WhatsApp user, it is useful to have a real easy, quick access to another artificial intelligence chatbot to ask questions.
It is rather interesting, though, isn't it? I mean, ChatGPT is kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I've, over the last week or so, used it for, really simple stuff. I found an old coin. I just took a picture of it and said, what is this coin? And it instantly gave me almost bullet point list of what it was, the history of it, and its potential value, which was naff all, by the way. But I thought that's extraordinary because you couldn't really do that through Safari or Chrome. You'd have to do quite a lot of research to get there. It might take you half a day to do that. But there it was. I've asked it some convoluted mathematical questions to test it out. It's a bit spooky, you think, because I don't know where it's getting all this information from, Will. It's like an episode of Doctor Who.
Well, it's sucked it all up from the internet and other people's material without copyright permission at the moment. That's where most of the information has come from.
Yeah.
And that's part of the challenge. But yeah, I find it really useful. You can use it to speed things up. I'm just asking it at the moment, how old is Ian Collins, to see what answer it comes back with.
I can't wait for this. Go on. What does it say?
How old is Ian Collins? I'm actually using Grok, which is the AI on the platform X. There are a number of different birth dates online for individuals named Ian Collins.
Well, yeah, there would be, wouldn't there? Because it's not like I'm not the only Ian Collins on the planet. But it does. But you can take that and find the right one that you're looking for. I think there might even be a cricketer or something called Ian Collins. If he's younger, we'll go for that one, Will.
Here's the one. Ian Collins was born on October the 24th, 1942. And as of today, he's 82 years old.
There you go. That's me. Yeah, I love that.
And then it calls you a well-known talk presenter and writer.
Oh, I quite like that, yeah. Stephen King's got nothing on this mama sitting here, I'm telling you. I'm telling you.
Happy 82nd.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm doing 8 decades in, my 9th decade even. And what is fueling the rise in shark attacks? I can hardly believe this, but apparently it is true. What's going on, Will?
Yeah, this is a beauty. People are getting too close to sharks for selfies, and they're getting bitten.
As you would do if you get too near a shark.
But it's like... without taking it back to being too morbid, around the death of the Pope, people are going and trying to take selfies with the dead body of the former pontiff.
Oh, for goodness sake.
What is this all about? It's like, why would you take a selfie with a dead Pope?
I mean, indeed, but people have tried that. You know, there's obviously areas, museums, you know,
Auschwitz, for example. People,
Auschwitz, where you shouldn't be taking photographs. There's the Arlington Cemetery in the States. I think you're not supposed to take photos, etc. There's all of these areas, but it takes nothing, does it, for some half-wit to go, no, I'm going to be the one taking the photo.
But this goes back to my point earlier about digital citizenship, right? If somebody explains to you that you don't take photographs or selfies at a funeral, or the idea of getting near a wild animal for a cool photo is going to end up giving you more grief than good, that sort of stuff might fit into my new 10-part program.
I think it might, maybe part 3 or something. Yeah. We
avoid lions.
But I mean, where we see this, of course, in a more as if a shark attack isn't disturbing, of course.
Exactly.
But when you see somebody getting beaten up in the street, or even, you know, at school, which is always a bit more distressing because it's kids, and you've got 20 people literally filming it. Now, it's not that they've happened on a tragic accident or a one-off moment. This is being filmed in a very deliberate, orchestrated way. Somebody getting brutally beaten up. I won't try and stop it. Maybe physically I can't. I won't try and shout. I will literally stand there and hold it. And when you look at some of those videos, there's 20, 30 people in a circle all doing the same thing. And I wonder what has happened to the human race.
You're quite right. And technology has made that worse. It's enabled that and made it worse. But I still think there's something to be done in training people how to use this stuff. With great power comes great responsibility, or whatever the line was in that film.
Well, indeed. I mean, I mentioned this, you know, when I wrote that book a few years ago. I think there is a chapter I wrote in there about people taking selfies. And I remember seeing it in a pub, possibly one of the first times I saw this happen. Which was, I think, a group of students, I would assume, and a girl on the end of the table taking a picture of her own face. And I thought, hang on a second, a few years ago, you'd be calling a doctor. Have you seen what's happened to Jane? She's taking a photo of her own face. No one ever did that. No one ever went out with a camera before, turned it around and went, ching, I'll take a picture of my own fizzog. I mean, that's just mad. You see it in gyms. And very casually, blokes standing there, not even blinking, in front of everyone, in front of the mirror, with the old camera in your hand thing, taking a picture of their man boobs, or their newly toned man boobs. Really? That would have been, you'd be running. If that happened at work, you'd be running. Have you seen what's happened to Jim? He's taking pictures of his own breasts. He's taking pictures of his own face. Call someone. Get the medics in.
That when you first saw that, were they using the Fox Talbot box brownie? Because you know you've been around for a while.
There was a guy with a canary in his hand, or whatever it was that they used to have. But quite extraordinary how casual it is. And I don't know if you remember this. Well, we have referenced this before, but years and years ago, when this kind of whole thing first started, there was it must have been the Daily Mail or the Mail Online picture of a model holding her phone in a mirror. The classic photograph of holding your phone in the mirror photo. But that wasn't a thing then. So the story was, how stupid is this woman? She's taken a picture of herself and left the camera in the shot. Because, of course, that would have been really weird back then. This is only like 20 years ago. Now, it's a thing.
I remember when people were trying to get selfies with the old Queen. That was something that happened for a while.
Yes, yeah, that suddenly turned around, didn't it? Curious times we live in. We've all got too many pictures anyway. So, listen, Will, we will speak again. We are going to do that deep dive into getting your phone safe, phone safe for your kids. How do you do it, etc. Will Geyer is, of course, our tech correspondent. Thank you to him. Peter Carter, will you take a picture of your own face then for us?
Yeah, just take a few selfies here. Yeah, just take a few selfies. Yeah, is that all right? Yeah. Is that all right?
I'm trying to think. This is going to sound weird. I'm not sure I've ever taken a selfie.
You've never taken it? My grandmother had one selfie taken, and I was in the selfie with her.
Yeah. I am completely lying when I say that. I've had it with mates, but I don't think...
Just of yourself?
Taking a picture of my own, or maybe as a joke, but taking a picture of my own face is clearly would be a sign that I'm on a path to some kind of illness. Right?
Well, I generally take one and say what I'm talking about on the show, and and say, you know, I'm in the studio now.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
a happy face is a happy story.
Yeah,
a sad face is a sad story.
Neutral expression, if it's sort of
expression, all of that stuff. Yeah, it is kind of strange because years ago people wouldn't have gone out on a Saturday and gone, right, I've got everything ready. I've got my wallet, I've got my car keys, I've got my Polaroid Kodak camera. Nobody would have even met. If you'd seen somebody in a nightclub with a camera, they'd have probably been thrown out the club.
Yes, and it was almost like it was a thing, wasn't it, to have a photograph taken, and everyone had their sort of fixed smiles. And I remember just when I was a kid, I remember don't use the camera too much because it's expensive to get them developed, and it cost a few pounds to get it developed, and it was sort of a thing. Whereas now you can take hundreds of photos and there's absolutely no consequence whatsoever. Yeah, and keep going until you get it right, which in my case is a long time.
Have you lost any? Have you lost photos? You thought, I can't believe I lost.
Yeah, definitely. Although I found one recently from a long time ago of me with Gladstone the cat in the Treasury.
Gladstone the
back
cat.
in the day. Back in the day.
Love it. What's happening after 4?
We've got a really interesting story for you. So imagine somebody criticises you, or you're in an argument with someone and you joke to me, maybe even on air, you say, oh, I'll have to get the torches or the pitchforks out on this one, ha ha ha. Well, that's almost exactly